Why do terrible things happen to good girls? Because bad boys attract them like moths to a flame. Timed, often naive, they idealize their partner, and they blatantly ignore the glaring red flags. Sometimes these destructive relationships last a long time, and other times, the realization comes quicker. Sooner or later, there comes a choice: leave or continue to get burned, until the moth burns to ashes. The incident that will be discussed entered the history of Austin, Texas, USA as one of the most heinous and probably exceedingly didactic. Jennifer was nowhere to be seen. Late on the evening of August 16, 2005, Jennifer Cave, the new girlfriend of Michael Rodriguez, was last in touch. Throughout the night, Michael waited for her call. However, exhausted from work, he unwittingly fell asleep. By morning, there were no missed calls from her. Concerned, Michael remembered Jennifer had promised to call him back once she had dropped off her friend Colton at home. He was uneasy about the fact that she had to go out of her way because Colton didn't arrange his own ride home, and generally he didn't trust Colton and his lifestyle. Meanwhile, Jennifer's roommate, with whom she lived, found Jennifer not at home. Her alarm clock was blaring, but there was no one to turn it off. It seemed Jennifer hadn't spent the night at home. Her friend became worried. They usually informed each other of their plans. She tried calling Jennifer. There was no response, which was uncharacteristic of her. Jennifer has her first day of work today. It's unlikely she would go without changing, the roommate thought. Jennifer's office clothes were neatly hanging on the rack, appearing untouched as if she hadn't taken anything with her. On August 17th at 8:30 a.m., the director of the law firm was notified of the new employee's tardiness. During her internship, Miss Cave had made a positive impression. It was odd that she would allow herself such behavior on her first day of work. By 9 a.m., colleagues called Jennifer, but she didn't answer. Around 11 a.m., the employer sent one of the managers to check on her at home. Persistent knocking went unanswered. They then tried to reach out to the secondary contact number listed on her resume. Sharon Sedwick, Jennifer's mother, answered the call. She was surprised and seemingly disappointed by the call. She said she would try to locate her daughter. Sharon also couldn't reach Jennifer. Growing worried, suspicion crept into her mind. Apparently she's dropped everything again for that irresponsible young man, she concluded. No one in Jennifer's circle liked her ex-boyfriend, Colton Pitonyak. Despite his intellect and financial status, he always seemed to drag her down. Mrs. Sedwick called Colton. He said he hadn't seen her daughter for some time. It seemed he wasn't concerned that Jennifer was missing. For some reason, her mother didn't believe him. More than 12 hours passed with no news. After all hospitals in Austin were checked to no avail, Sharon called the police. She reported her daughter missing and expressed concern that she might be in danger at Pitonyak's house. Following the call to law enforcement, Sharon, along with her husband Jim Sedwick, went to Colton's place to speak with him personally. However, he didn't open the door for them or the responding officers, claiming he had no desire to talk and they had no search warrant. He knew his rights well, so the police had to leave. However, the situation was suspicious. Jennifer's car was found near Pitonyak's house. Although the car was empty, its presence in the parking lot was thought-provoking. It appeared Jennifer was indeed inside the house. Sharon and Jim were certain something had happened to her. The police decided not to waste time and inspected Jennifer's house. However, they found nothing of interest. The only leads were information from Michael and Sharon, as well as Jennifer's car near Colton's house. Michael recounted how Jennifer went out to meet with friends on the evening of August 16th to celebrate getting a job. She had called him several times. Among the friends was her ex-boyfriend Colton, who was with her at the time of the call. During the conversation, Jennifer didn't seem scared or worried, but mentioned that Colton was acting strangely, so she needed to take him home. After that, contact with her was lost. A grisly discovery. All clues led to Pitonyak's residence. While the police were hesitating, Sharon and Jim decided to take matters into their own hands. They drove to Colton's place again. Upon arriving at the apartment complex, they knocked on the door, but no one answered. Sensing something was terribly wrong, the girls' parents decided to call a locksmith to open the lock. However, Jim found a better way. One of the apartment windows was open, and he decided to enter through it. Inside, everything was scattered around. It was clear that no one had maintained order in the house, and the apartment itself resembled more of a den. The man was hit by a putrid smell that immediately triggered his gag reflex. Covering his mouth with his hand, Jim moved toward where the smell was even stronger. The house was empty. Looking into the bathroom, Jennifer's stepfather noticed clutter. Upon closer inspection, he saw a dismembered female body. The head and limbs had been severed. Nearby lay trash bags and a sports bag. Horrified, Jim began to examine their contents. Inside were the remaining parts of the body. The legs of the deceased were covered with freckles, just like his stepdaughter's. However, the corpse was so mutilated that it was impossible to definitively identify who it was. The man hoped, until the last moment, that it was not his stepdaughter. After regaining consciousness, he called the emergency services. Jennifer's life. Jennifer Cave was born in March 1984 near Bishop, Texas. Her family lived in a modest farmhouse. Sharon, her mother, was in her second marriage, which brought 3 more children into the family: Jennifer herself, Lauren, and Clayton. Vanessa, from Sharon's first marriage, was the oldest sibling. Charlie, Jennifer's father, worked as a welder. He was a decent husband and father until alcohol turned him into someone mean and unbearable, hurling insults and causing trouble. When sober, he was calm and respectable. Despite the unstable home environment, the family remained close-knit. Sharon worked as an accountant at a chemical plant, while also taking care of the home and children. Unlike her more sociable brother and sister, Jennifer was shy. While they easily made friends and played outside, she preferred the company of books, which sharpened her intellect and gifted her with an excellent memory. Her passion for reading affected her eyesight, requiring her to wear glasses. Just like the braces in her mouth, the glasses didn't help her self-esteem. Confidence was not characteristic of our heroine, but that didn't stop her from actively participating in school's social and athletic activities. Eventually, her father's destructive habit led to the family's breakup. After the separation, Jennifer and Clayton stayed with Charlie. They supported him with great compassion, trying to prevent his downfall. Jennifer wanted so much to help her father quit drinking that she overlooked his lack of will to fight. 4 years after the divorce, in 1999, Sharon met a new man, Jim Sedwick, by chance. As Jennifer entered her teenage years, she transformed. She got rid of her braces, and contact lenses replaced her glasses, turning her into a true beauty. However, her character began to change along with her appearance. She started hanging out with kids from troubled families. Yet, thanks to her high intellect, she graduated among the top of her class. Later, Jennifer enrolled in Texas State University, majoring in finance, but quickly became disillusioned with her studies and withdrew after the first semester. She spent some time attending a community college in Austin and worked part-time at a city restaurant to support herself. During this period, she dated a guy named Mark, a decent young man from a respectable family. Their relationship could have led to marriage, but Jennifer got pulled into the nightlife. She began frequenting parties and drinking. Perhaps influenced by her father's genes and negative example, her fondness for alcohol grew. Along with drinking, marijuana entered her life. Sharon tried to influence her daughter, but to no avail. It was during one of these nights out that Jennifer met Colton Pitonyak, the tragic end of Jennifer Cave. Jennifer Cave's life was tragically cut short by a gunshot wound to her right arm. The bullet passed completely through her arm and into her chest, striking her heart. The injury to a vital artery led to rapid blood loss, resulting in her untimely demise. What happened to her body afterward is horrifying. Forensic experts discovered multiple stab wounds across her body, with her chest and neck suffering the most damage. In total, the assailant inflicted 18 post-mortem stab wounds. The perpetrator then decapitated her and fired a shot through her throat into her head, intending to dispose of her body discreetly. By severing her upper limbs, he placed them in a prepared bag and trash bags. Her torso was left in the bathtub, covered with a saw. Something thwarted the assailant's initial plan, forcing a change in his actions. Evidence uncovered. At the time, Jennifer Cave's body was discovered, and the police arrived. They had not yet obtained a warrant to search Colton Pitonyak's apartment. Initially, the officers could do nothing but observe the victim's body and secure the area. Once they finally obtained the necessary permission, a thorough search of the apartment was conducted. They found 3.38 caliber shell casings. The firearm used was located in Pitonyak's car, which was parked in the garage. A large blood-stained machete was retrieved from the dishwasher. Toxicology reports indicated the presence of alcohol, marijuana, and methamphetamine in the victim's bloodstream. In one of the rooms, there was a road atlas with pages torn out, highlighting routes in southwest Texas. This clue shed light on the apartment owner's absence. Colton Pitonyak had fled. Law enforcement immediately issued a warrant for his apprehension. Who is Colton Pitonyak? Colton originated from Bryant, Arkansas. He grew up as a sharp-witted boy with impressive looks, enjoying popularity among girls during his teenage years. His father ran a successful agricultural business that flourished year after year, allowing the family to live comfortably. However, this abundance spoiled Colton. On one hand, he was ambitious and goal-oriented. On the other, he could become aggressive and hot-tempered. Colton was passionate about skateboarding and played the guitar. He attended a Catholic boys' middle school in Little Rock, where he excelled academically and frequently made the honor roll. He was also a National Merit Scholarship finalist. In 2000, Pitonyak was one of 7 senior finalists at his school and among 166 in the state. By his senior year, he began to encounter problems with alcohol and fights, largely because he was part of a group of local affluent kids who led a leisurely lifestyle, often throwing parties with all the ensuing consequences. Nonetheless, thanks to high graduation scores, he easily got admitted to the University of Texas at Austin. Rather than focusing on his studies, he continued his wayward lifestyle, losing friends and gaining a reputation as a frequent drinker and marijuana user. He could have had a bright future if not for his penchant for self-destruction. After being expelled from a university fraternity, he began distributing controlled substances. His parents fought to curb his addiction, even taking him back home. A fateful meeting. In the spring of 2004, Jennifer and Colton met at a party. They were instantly drawn to each other. Jennifer, who often idealizes people, decided to give a potentially dangerous relationship a chance rather than run from it. Their friendship gradually grew into love. Over time, Jennifer began using illegal drugs with Colton. His luxurious apartment gradually turned into a den of excess, and using illegal substances together became a household rule. As a result, Jennifer's addiction only got worse. Parents repeatedly tried to tear her away from these addictions. They even gave her a car, hoping to encourage her to be home more often. However, each time she returned, her promises quickly faded. Colton's condition worsened. He became increasingly paranoid and began carrying a gun and knife in an attempt to mimic the image of a gangster. In 2004, Pitonyak was arrested for possession of illegal substances. He even went through a rehabilitation program once, but Colton showed no sincere desire to fight his addiction. Separation. One day, Jennifer's parents decided to visit her. However, the visit brought disappointment. Jennifer had not kept her promises, had lost a significant amount of weight, and looked generally unwell. Her family suggested she undergo treatment at a rehabilitation center, to which she flatly refused. Upset, Sharon and Jim cut off her financial support, believing this tough love approach would encourage her to take control of her life. But left without money, Jennifer found no better option than to move in with Colton. What happened in his apartment is hard to say, but after living with him for a month, Jennifer decided to leave. A friend offered her a room and support. Miss Cave shared her fears. She no longer felt safe with Colton but did not delve into details. Something clearly frightened her as she refused to reconcile with her ex. One day he came to her, asking her to come back. Jennifer remained firm, especially when she saw the knife Colton brought with him. She asked Colton to calm down and suggested they remain friends. Surprisingly, he agreed. Contact with him was minimized, and moreover, she began reconnecting with her parents. Finally, her life seemed to be getting back on track. In early 2005, Jennifer started a new relationship with a guy named Scott, a single father who appeared quite decent. His lifestyle was the polar opposite of Colton's. Scott worked as a waiter at a restaurant, played keyboards in a band, and was a good singer, all while leading a sober life. In turn, Jennifer began to feel better about herself, even looking healthier by his side. She took on the role of a homemaker and became a mother figure to his daughter. However, she was still liable to leave at a moment's notice if Colton called. The arrival of Laura Hall. Eventually, Colton moved to a new apartment complex with a pool named Orange Tree close to the university, making it a hot spot for daily parties. His behavior continued to be erratic, with some friends reporting they had seen him engaging in Russian roulette by himself. It was during one of these phases that he met Laura Ashley Hall. She was a frequent attendee of these parties and became infatuated with him, exhibiting jealousy towards any female in Colton's circle, especially Jennifer. Laura was perceived in various ways by their peers, most commonly described as arrogant and capable of putting anyone in their place. Laura, like Colton, came from a well-off family. Miss Hall was athletic, participating in various competitions, and she was academically successful, showing great promise. After high school, she enrolled in university but soon dropped out, opting for a job and a leisurely lifestyle instead. Before long, Colton and Laura started dating. Like Jennifer, she was deeply drawn to him. When he was sentenced to 60 days in jail in June 2005, Laura sent him all her earnings, even going into debt. Friends noted that she changed for the worse, becoming bold, neglecting her job and her personal care. Many believed she had also started using banned drugs. Unlike with Jennifer, Colton disregarded her feelings, even to the extent of extinguishing cigarettes on her. A new chapter begins, ends. During this time, Jennifer ended her relationship with Scott. She felt unworthy of his family and did not want to cause them any trouble. Jennifer occasionally communicated with Colton, who was still infatuated with her. However, she did not rekindle their previous relationship, keeping their interactions strictly platonic. All Jennifer desired was to secure a job and return to college. In August, a promising opportunity arose in her life. She began a new relationship with Michael Rodriguez and, most importantly, found an excellent job. After several days of training at a law firm, she performed so impressively that she was offered a consultant position with a respectable salary. Jennifer was proud of herself and truly happy. On August 16th, she decided to celebrate the start of her new life with friends. That evening, they went to a bar and then headed to a club. According to a friend, the bouncer didn't let Colton in because of his appearance. This might have led him to seek out controlled substances. The investigation continues. In an effort to shed light on the events of that fateful night, investigators interviewed Colton's neighbors. They managed to uncover intriguing information. Around 3 a.m. on August 17th, Nora Sullivan heard a knock at her door. Opening it, she saw Colton standing there looking suspicious with blood on him and a pistol visible at his waist. Startled, she inquired what had happened. Colton told her he had gotten into a shootout with some individuals. Nora didn't hear any gunshots and thought he was lying as usual. She closed the door and peeked through the peephole to see him eventually walk away. None of the neighbors interviewed heard any gunshots that night either. Detectives also discovered that Colton had been in contact with Laura twice that night. The morning of August 17th, he visited a hardware store where he purchased a saw, several masks, and gloves, as well as a significant amount of cleaning supplies. Using these, he dismembered Jennifer's body and planned to clean the apartment to erase any evidence of the crime. It's possible that the unexpected arrival of Sharon and Jim startled him and prompted his flight. Apprehension. A critical discovery in Colton's apartment led investigators directly to his trail. Colton, along with Laura Hall, was found in Mexico. They had crossed the border in Laura's car. Local authorities distributed Colton's photo nationwide. During this time, the couple enjoyed themselves, visiting cinemas and restaurants. They stayed in a hotel in the border town of Piedras Negras, where an employee recognized Colton as the sought-after individual. The employee took his photo and sent it to the police. Mexican law enforcement apprehended the duo and transported them to the border, where U.S. officials arrested Pitonyak. Laura Hall was released. Before her release, Laura caused a scene with the Border Patrol, loudly protesting Colton's innocence and obstructing the arrest process. Later, she admitted that their trip to Mexico was the best experience she'd ever had. In total, they spent about 5 days abroad. Trial. On August 23, 2005, Colton Pitonyak was charged with a crime against Jennifer Cave. A month later, Laura Hall was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice. The prosecution presented evidence found in the apartment, including a videotape from the store and a receipt listing items purchased. Colton said he did not remember anything about the night of August 16, 17, attributing his amnesia to heavy drinking and the use of illegal drugs. Initially, he did not deny hurting Jennifer, but insisted he did not remember anything. He claimed that he woke up and discovered his ex-girlfriend's body in the bathroom. After discovering the body, he contacted Laura, who advised him to buy a saw and cleaning supplies. She helped dismember the victim and hide the body parts in bags. The prosecution argued that she was responsible for Jennifer's post-mortem injuries. Colton later hinted that Hall may have been motivated by jealousy, suggesting her involvement in an act of revenge against her rival. However, both defendants pleaded not guilty. Nevertheless, the evidence of his involvement was overwhelming. First, Jennifer's body was found in Colton's apartment. His fingerprints and DNA were found on the machete, saw, and firearm found at the crime scene, and the weapon in his car was identified as the crime weapon. In addition, he was the one who purchased the cleaning supplies from the store. The jury had no doubt of his guilt. On January 29, 2007, Colton Pitonyak was sentenced to 55 years in prison with parole eligibility after serving at least half of his sentence. His earliest release date will not occur until 2060. The case against Laura Hall proved complex. The prosecution suggested she could have acted out of blind affection for Colton. Laura's DNA was found on one of the victim's shoes, a store towel, and even the firearm used. The defense argued this only proved her involvement in disposing of the body, not in the initial act. They couldn't prove she was the one who fired the first shot, attributed to Jennifer's head post-mortem. No evidence placed her at the scene at the time of the crime. Laura insisted she only learned of the crime when Colton told her and claimed he forced her to flee to Mexico with him. However, witnesses from their time in Mexico reported the couple seemed to enjoy their trip. In 2007, Laura Hall was found guilty of obstructing justice and tampering with evidence, receiving a 6-year prison sentence. A subsequent trial in 2010 resulted in the maximum sentence of 11 years and a $14,000 fine. Laura was paroled on March 15, 2018, with GPS monitoring, completing her sentence in August of the same year. Her whereabouts thereafter remain unknown. Was Colton framed? Colton Pitonyak remains incarcerated. He has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been unsuccessful. In these appeals, he consistently stated that he has no memory of the tragic night's events. However, he revealed that there are witnesses who claim Laura confessed to Jennifer's demise. He alleges that during the trial, the prosecutors were aware of this information but failed to disclose it to his defense team, suggesting a possible setup. Although Pitonyak's legal motions were denied, this revelation raised questions among the public. Moreover, Jennifer's parents believe that Laura's punishment was insufficient. They are convinced that she played a more significant role than she admits. Unlike Colton, Hall has never expressed remorse or regret for Jennifer's death. She referred to Jennifer only as that girl or the dead girl, sometimes even using derogatory terms. To this day, the exact events of that fateful night remain unknown. Only Jennifer knows the truth that the walls of Pitonyak's residence silently conceal. Sadly, the dead cannot speak. Jennifer's life was cut short in her prime. Regrettably, she realized too late an essential truth. Staying away from certain individuals and ceasing communication with them could mean saving oneself. Sometimes the search for paradise on earth can lead one straight into a real-life hell from which escape is impossible. However, it's only fair to note that a significant factor in this journey is who accompanies you in search of this paradise. Choosing a companion should always be done with the utmost care and caution, yet sometimes, even the person who seems closest and dearest can turn into a true, merciless monster. The tale of Ivon Baldelli and Brian Brimager began like something out of a fairy tale. Ivon thought she had found true love, for which she was ready to run to the ends of the earth. However, from the very beginning, her relationship raised concerns among Ivon's family, who disapproved of her partner. Unfortunately, the family's worries were not unfounded. This complex case started in 2011, when a happy and in-love Ivon left with her beloved for a tropical island. As it turned out, she was heading straight towards her own demise. Only several years later, disfigured fragments of her body were discovered in a swamp, bagged alongside the remains of her cherished pets. Ivon's family exerted considerable effort to achieve justice, efforts that cost another family member their life. Who was Ivon Baldelli? Ivon Olivia Baldelli, née Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in the southern part of sunny California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold, growing up alongside her older brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she shared a particularly close bond from childhood. When Ivon was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried to Lillian Faust, and the grown children developed wonderful relationships with their stepmother, a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Ivon received a solid education and explored several career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She was married twice, but both marriages ended in separation. Additionally, a surgery she underwent in her youth, followed by complications, left Ivon unable to have children. After divorcing her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Ivon lived alone in her small apartment with her beloved dog, whom she affectionately called her child. She remained in constant contact with her father and sister, calling them almost daily and making an effort to see her family at least once a month. Meeting Brian and the love triangle. In 2009, as Ivon was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At that time, he was legally married and raising a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open to having an affair and shared with his mistress how unhappy he was in his marriage, claiming he hadn't filed for divorce solely because of his child, whom he didn't want to distress. Baldelli fell for this fit and handsome man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself, and knowing how hard it can be to leave such a relationship, she didn't rush her partner, believing that the presence of a child was indeed the main obstacle. However, Brian wasn't as straightforward and sincere as he appeared. From a young age, his attractive looks had made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was accustomed to juggling multiple relationships simultaneously and expertly deceived the women who fell for him, promising each one marriage, a family, and eternal love. It soon came to light that the married Brimmager was not only seeing Ivon, but also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a stunning blonde with extensive connections. She was an analyst at the White House and had made a remarkable career during George W. Bush Jr.'s administration. When Ivon discovered the existence of another rival, she decided to confront the issue head-on and was ready to fight for the man she loved. Gathering her courage, she called her lover's wife to inform her that Brian was cheating on her with not just one, but two women. This revelation sparked a major scandal, forcing Brian to make a difficult choice. Eventually, he chose Ivon, though it's possible she pressured him into making this decision. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with his new love interest. At that time, he was still serving in the Marines, but had been contemplating ending his military career for a while. The couple seemed genuinely happy, but Ivon's relatives remained wary of her new partner, doubting the sincerity of his feelings. Moving to a tropical paradise. In the summer of 2011, Brian began to talk about radically changing his life, leaving the service, moving away from the bustling city, and settling down on a tropical island. Ivon shared his sentiments, supported him in everything, and was ready to follow him wherever and whenever he decided. She believed she had met the most important man in her life and adored him. By September of the same year, the decision was final. The couple chose to move to Panama and settle on the small island of Carnero, a place that could truly be called a paradise. Ivon informed her family just before leaving, so they had no chance to persuade her to reconsider. Ivon sold her apartment, quit her job, and started packing for the journey. She took only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, hoping to fulfill her dream of opening a small boutique to create and sell custom outfits to tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Ivon, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a couple of days in the country's capital before taking a ferry to Carnero Island, where they rented a house right on the ocean front. The climate was hot and humid with little temperature variation, attracting a steady flow of tourists throughout the year, primarily diving and surfing enthusiasts. The island was just 1 square kilometer, so one could leisurely walk around it in about an hour. All the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior was dense jungle and swampy areas teeming with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it unsafe to venture into. Brian, who had been an excellent guitar player since his youth, brought his instrument with the intention of starting a musical career on the island, performing in entertainment venues. Within a week after moving, he had made connections with several local bar owners, and one of them happily offered him a job. He played in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his appreciative audience often bought him drinks as a compliment, leading him to drink heavily almost daily. Ivon's business also developed very slowly, with weak sales and virtually no profit. However, she didn't lose heart. She started working at one of the bars and even adopted a second dog she found on the island and decided to keep. She communicated with her sister Michelle Valenzuela almost daily, sharing everything, but her messages became increasingly shorter and more somber, which worried her family. The first few months on the island seemed like paradise to the couple. Ivon hoped that Brian would propose, and they would have a romantic wedding ceremony on the ocean shore. But time passed. Brian didn't rush into marriage, and their relationship rapidly deteriorated. The mysterious disappearance. In early December, Michelle stopped receiving messages from Ivon, which raised her concerns significantly. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle, inquiring when he could stop by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her garage before heading to Panama. This call and question caught Michelle off guard. It meant Brian had returned to the U.S. and wanted to retrieve his vehicle. But where was Ivon? Why hadn't she come back or even called? In response, Brian claimed he had explained everything in an email sent a few days earlier. He also mentioned that his now ex-girlfriend had supposedly sent her a message explaining the situation. Michelle checked her messages but found nothing, so she turned to her email. Indeed, there were 2 unread messages, one from her sister and one from her boyfriend. In his message, Brian stated that Ivon had left him, running off with a new lover to Costa Rica. The other message, supposedly from Ivon, claimed she had left Brian upon discovering his infidelity and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. It concluded with her saying she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine Verhoeven, with whom he had been involved all along, and who was pregnant with his child when he and Ivon flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed plausible and logical, especially since Ivon couldn't have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else could have been devastating for her. However, Ivon wasn't known for impulsive actions, and she would have certainly called her sister to discuss such significant changes in her life. Moreover, the tone of the supposed message from Ivon was somewhat odd and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle tried to determine her sister's current whereabouts, she couldn't get any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and the messages that came through were brief and detached, saying things like, "I'm okay. I need some time. I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian should join her in filing a missing persons report. Brian appeared nervous but insisted it wasn't necessary, claiming Ivon was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to come home on her own. Despite Brian's reluctance even to discuss the matter and his hasty departure after picking up his vehicle, a message from Ivon's phone soon arrived, stating she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message provided Michelle with some relief, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping Ivon would return as indicated in the message. Search efforts and surprising discoveries. By mid-January, not only had Ivon not returned home, but she also hadn't called even once during that time, and her messages had completely stopped. Moreover, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had gotten married to the mother of his child, Christine Verhoeven, right before the new year, which seemed very odd since he had parted ways with his former girlfriend just a few weeks before the celebration. Concerned, Michelle finally went to the police and reported her sister missing, suspecting that Ivon had not gone to Costa Rica. An official inquiry sent to Panama confirmed her fears. It was definitively established that Ivon Baldelli had not left the country. Valenzuela then turned to her cousin, a programmer, to help trace the IP address from which Ivon's messages were sent, determining their actual origin. It turned out the emails, supposedly sent by Ivon from Costa Rica in December, were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was located. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. With the situation becoming increasingly alarming, Michelle hurriedly informed the police about her discovery. Valenzuela reached out to the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her sister in Panama, and then continued to send messages from her phone and email, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue gathering proof of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Ivon. He promised Verhoeven that he would soon return, they would get married, and raise their daughter together. Moreover, Christine was unaware that her child's father had gone to the island with another woman, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's own investigation. 2 months after the woman's disappearance, her sister and niece personally flew to Panama. There, they sought the expertise of Don Winner, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in locating missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Ivon's disappearance and the version of events provided by Brian. Winner, after listening to them, immediately expressed concern that the chances of Ivon being alive were slim. With vast experience in such investigations and leveraging his connections, Winner decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was also organized with the participation of Ivon's family members. Later, Ivon's father, stepmother, brother, and several other relatives and close friends arrived in Panama to join the search and assist the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Caranero, combing it thoroughly, yet they found no trace of Baldelli. Their search efforts were hampered by dense undergrowth and swampy marshes teeming with wildlife. In addition, the family questioned the island's residents about how well they knew Brian and Ivon and what they could say about them. It turned out that the couple had recently been heavily indulging in alcoholic beverages and were frequently involved in loud disputes, unconcerned about those around them. Almost daily, they were seen in bars drinking alcohol and having heated arguments. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Ivon's face and body. She almost never took off her sunglasses, seemingly to hide the bruises under her eyes. The landlord of the house the couple had rented confirmed that neighbors regularly complained about the noise, screams, and cursing coming from their residence. Simultaneously, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to scour the waters around it for any potential evidence or remains of the missing woman. Unfortunately, these searches too did not yield any success. the prime suspect, and the first solid evidence. From the outset, Brian was the prime suspect in the case, but there was nothing concrete to charge him with. He denied any involvement, consistently recounting the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It wasn't until September 21st, 2012, that Brimmager was finally interrogated, and a search was conducted in his home. At the time, his wife Christine was at work, while Brian was unemployed, staying at home with their child and indulging in his favorite pastime, playing golf. Initially, he appeared confident, repeating that Ivon had left him after finding out about his child with another woman. However, he became visibly nervous when the police mentioned that the last messages sent in Ivon's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his table. The seized laptop turned out to belong to Ivon, with messages sent from it after she supposedly fled. A photo of the missing woman with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November, where Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and shared daughter, presumably how Baldelli learned about them. Moreover, the laptop's search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were significant but circumstantial, since neither a body nor a mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had been sending messages pretending to be Ivon didn't definitively prove him guilty. Soon, Don Winter discovered that before leaving Panama, Brimmager had sold a machete he owned. In an online conversation with a potential buyer, he joked that he had used the weapon just once to finish off a stripper. The joke was macabre, prompting authorities to track down the new owner of the machete and seize the blade for examination, which initially revealed nothing conclusive. The long-awaited arrest. The police overlooked another crucial detail: Ivon's bank card, which Brian used after her disappearance. To add credibility to his story, before returning to the States, he decided to make a trip to Costa Rica and use the missing woman's card a couple of times, creating the illusion that she had indeed fled to that country. He paid for his tickets in cash and withdrew money from different locations in San Jose, draining the card before discarding it. However, Brimmager failed to consider that he was captured on surveillance cameras at the ATMs. It wasn't until July 2013, a year and a half after the woman's disappearance, that her relatives, armed with all the evidence gathered by the police, FBI agents, and Don Winter, finally managed to secure Brian's arrest. Initially, he was detained on charges of making false statements and obstructing the investigation, as there was nothing more substantial to charge him with at that time. By then, he had become a father for the second time. Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to engage the suspect in a candid conversation, offering him a chance to confess to the crime and disclose the location of the body, but Brian consistently denied any wrongdoing. His lawyer also insisted on the absence of a body or direct evidence, proving Ivon's demise and Brian's involvement in it. The gruesome discovery in the swamp. Just 2 months after Brimmager's arrest, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. On the island of Carnero, a worker taking a shortcut wandered into the swampy underbrush and spotted an army backpack barely visible above the water's surface. Driven by curiosity and hoping to find something valuable or useful inside, he looked in the bag, only to recoil in horror at the sight of a human skull staring back at him. He immediately reported his find to the police, and responding officers took the backpack for examination. Inside were fragments of a human body, along with the remains of 2 small dogs. The remains had been chopped up, placed in the bag, and discarded in a location where it was assumed they would never be found. DNA testing confirmed that the human remains belonged to Ivon, although limbs were missing. Pathologists also determined that she had been brutally beaten before her demise, with a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The demise of the dogs was probably orchestrated to lend credence to the narrative, as it seemed implausible that she would willingly leave behind her cherished pets on the island, suggesting a scenario where they were eliminated and laid to rest alongside their owner. When the chop marks found on the victim's bones were matched with the blade of the machete, there was no doubt. The body had been dismembered using this weapon, as each blade has its own signature, akin to a person's fingerprints. With this evidence, Brian was formally charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. The trial and verdict. In early 2014, Michelle Valenzuela was diagnosed with an advanced stage of aggressive cancer. She had been so consumed by the investigation into her sister's case that she neglected her deteriorating health, postponing visits to the doctor. After undergoing intensive treatment for about 6 months and realizing it was in vain, she decided to dedicate the last months of her life to seeking justice for her sister. In September 2014, when doctors told Michelle she had only a few weeks left, she declared that although she was losing her battle with the disease, she would continue to fight for her sister until her last breath. Choosing to make her testimony in front of Brian, she detailed everything she knew and submitted all their correspondence with Ivon to the court. She meticulously described Brian's actions after her sister's disappearance and then fainted from weakness. Michelle passed away 3 days later. The prosecution argued that on the evening of November 26th, following another argument with Ivon, when she discovered Brian's communications with Christine, Brian, in a fit of rage and under the influence of alcohol, assaulted Ivon and then fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub using a machete, also using it to take the live Yvonne's beloved dogs, and placed the remains in his military backpack. The limbs that didn't fit in the bag were dumped in the ocean, dropped off a rocky cliff early in the morning along with the blood-stained mattress. Brian carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the next few weeks, he continued living in the same coastal house, meticulously erasing any evidence of the crime. He told everyone on the island a story about his flighty girlfriend leaving him for a new lover, a story that sounded convincing enough that locals sympathized with Brian. And he even managed to find a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until his departure to the U.S. However, at the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of lying and cruelty. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Brian was forced to admit his guilt, but insisted that it was self-defense, claiming Yvonne had first attacked him with a knife, which he then used against her. He claimed all subsequent actions were carried out in the state of shock, asserting he didn't remember dismembering and packing the body, taking the lives of the dogs, and so forth. However, his internet searches and attempts to eliminate evidence spoke to his full awareness, and attempts to fabricate a story to justify Yvonne's absence. In the spring of 2016, Brian was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to only 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 2035. His service in the Marines was considered during sentencing, allowing him to avoid a life sentence. Lastly, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, stated she still believed in her husband's innocence and would support him no matter what. When a friend turns into a ruthless criminal, you've probably heard the saying, "With friends like these, who needs enemies?" This is often said about those who only pretend to be good friends, but are ready to betray, set up, deceive, and even commit a crime against you at any moment. Such vile actions often hide some selfish motive, but their consequences can be utterly unpredictable, and the bitter disappointment in a close person who betrayed your trust is usually the least of the evils. The case of Sarah Stern shocked even veteran police officers with the cynicism and cold-bloodedness with which her closest friend, whom she had known since childhood and trusted implicitly, dealt with the unfortunate young woman. It was this friend with whom the student shared her future plans and a significant secret that no one else knew. By doing so, Sarah essentially signed her own death warrant, as from that moment until the tragic end, the young man lived with plans on how to make her disappear forever while remaining above suspicion. Surprisingly, this crime could have been prevented if those around had taken the perpetrator's words and actions more seriously. The criminal even laid out his plan on paper, presenting it as a script for a horror movie. But let's dissect this complex story from the beginning to understand what drove such a good friend. Who was Sarah Stern? Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in the small town of Neptune City in Monmouth County, New Jersey. She was the only and dearly beloved child in the simple family of Michael and Susan Stern. Due to health issues, Mrs. Stern couldn't have more children, so the parents poured all their love into their long-awaited daughter. Sarah grew up as an active, cheerful, and very sociable child. She performed on the school theater stage, was passionate about photography, drew well, and was involved in sports, competing for the local swimming team and playing softball. She dreamed of becoming an artist or designer and was preparing to apply to a local specialized college when a terrible tragedy struck her family. In the autumn of 2013, when 16-year-old Sarah had just graduated from high school and started college in the field of art she had dreamed of, her mother passed away. The woman had fought a long battle with cancer, and it seemed several times that the disease had receded, but the insidious illness returned with new force and ultimately won. This loss was a huge shock for the entire family, especially for the young girl who was always very close to her mother. For a while, Stern fell into depression, but she tried to support her father with whom she lived and who also had a hard time. They also lived with a dog named Buddy, whom the girl adored. Gradually, life began to improve. Sarah made plans for the future, and after graduating from college, she wanted to apply to a prestigious national university in New York. But before that, she dreamed of traveling the world, particularly planning to visit Canada and perhaps even live there for some time. The abandoned car. Michael Stern often had to travel out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. But he never worried about leaving his daughter home alone because she was a grown, independent young woman and their town was considered quiet and safe. However, in December 2016, when he flew out for another business trip, trouble came knocking at his door. On the night of December 3rd, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., a call came into the police station from a concerned man reporting a car abandoned in the middle of the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was quite deserted, rarely traversed by anyone at night, making the solitary, empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The caller was a taxi driver, taking a shortcut home over the old bridge on the outskirts. He noticed the car parked by the side and stopped to see if anyone needed help. Finding the cabin empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting the driver might have come here to end their life by jumping into the water below, a sadly not uncommon occurrence at this spot. Responding officers noted the keys left in the ignition. There were no signs of blood in the car, nor any signs of a struggle, leading to the initial theory that someone came to the bridge with the intention of voluntarily leaving this world by jumping into the river below. The next step was to find out who owned the abandoned old silver sedan. A database check revealed the car belonged to one Lily Stern, a senior American citizen who recently celebrated her 85th birthday. She lived in the same town, about 10 kilometers from where her car was found. Officers promptly visited Miss Stern's home to understand how and why the elderly woman's car ended up on the bridge at night. Lily was found at home, alive, well, and surprised by the police visit. She explained that due to poor eyesight, she hadn't driven for years. Instead, her 19-year-old granddaughter Sarah was the one who drove the car. Concerned, Lily immediately tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. She then gave the officers her son's address, where he lived with Sarah, noting that only Sarah should be home since her father was away on a work trip and wouldn't be back until the next week. The mysteriously disappeared student. Sarah was not at home, and the back door to the house was found open, a worrying sign. An initial sweep by the police inside revealed nothing suspicious except for a dog whining locked in one of the bedrooms. There was no indication of any crime taking place. Belongings were in order, and there were no signs of struggle, bloodstains, or any evidence of an intruder's presence. By then, news of the situation had reached Michael Stern, and he was on his way home on the first available flight. The homeowner confirmed everything was in its place, and nothing was missing. Moreover, he stated that all of Sarah's personal belongings were also at home, including her passport, driver's license, and even her mobile phone, which she never parted with. The police shared their initial thoughts with Michael, suggesting his daughter might have gone to the bridge with the intention of jumping, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that after his wife's passing, Sarah had gone through a period of depression, but with the support of family, friends, and her studies, she managed to recover. Furthermore, she had big plans for the future, dreaming of becoming a designer, wanting to travel and see the world. Nonetheless, on the night of December 3rd, the student vanished from her own home, and a few hours later, her car was found abandoned on the bridge. These were the established facts. Sarah was officially missing, and the investigation had to figure out who she was in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. Testimonies from the first witnesses. It soon came to light that on December 2nd, Sarah Stern had spent nearly the entire day with her best friend Liam Nakatasny, whom she had known since childhood. Liam turned out to be the last person who saw her, potentially shedding light on this mysterious case. Thus, law enforcement quickly decided to speak with him to gather details and try to reconstruct the events of that day. Upon arriving at the Nakatasny residence, police were met by Liam's mother, who informed them that her son was sleeping off a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke him up. Seemingly confused about the situation, Liam was surprised to learn about Sarah's disappearance. He confirmed that they had spent most of the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to provide his statement. Liam shared that they had gone to college together in the morning, but decided to skip the last 2 lectures since it was Friday, and they wanted to relax. After class, they went back to her place, played video games, chatted, and shared their future plans. They left the house twice that day, once to grab food from a nearby fast food restaurant and another time to stop by a local supermarket. Around 7 in the evening, he left Sarah's house to head to his night shift at the 24-hour store and didn't see her after that. When asked if Sarah had been experiencing any psychological issues or other difficulties, Liam revealed quite a bit. He said that Sarah had been deeply depressed since her mother's passing, teetering between wanting to end it all or run away and start anew. He also mentioned that Sarah had had issues communicating with her father, struggling to find common ground. Liam didn't dismiss the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, but noted that shortly before disappearing, she had seriously considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money. His claim was confirmed by finding Canadian dollars in a bedside table drawer in Sarah's room, though the amount was so small it wouldn't have covered much. Another close friend and former classmate at Stearns, Preston Taylor, who had been her date to the high school prom and kept in touch after graduation, also gave a statement. He corroborated Liam's account, adding that Sarah was depressed and speculated that she either ran away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, he was in tears, expressing how much Sarah meant to him, search for the body, questioning other witnesses. The theory of Sarah fleeing to Canada, or anywhere for that matter, was almost immediately dismissed since she couldn't have left the country without her passport. Law enforcement then focused on the grimmer theory and organized a massive search effort in the river. The search was complicated by the strong current in that area, which could quickly carry a body miles away from the bridge. Divers were deployed, special equipment was used, and police, along with hundreds of volunteers, scoured both banks of the river, looking for remains or any of Sarah's belongings. Among the volunteers actively participating in the search were also Liam and Preston. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, no trace of Sarah was found. Therefore, law enforcement decided to continue questioning people who knew her and were close to her. That's when a peculiar discrepancy emerged. According to friends and classmates, Sarah was not depressed. She was in great spirits, and none had heard about any problems with her father. On the contrary, she always spoke of him warmly and lovingly. However, after Sarah's disappearance, Liam and Preston behaved as if they had lost a close relative, garnering sympathy from many. But soon, people started to notice that their behavior was odd, as if they were performing for an audience. The two had become very close, but this development occurred about a month before the incident. Therefore, the police decided to take a closer look at the friends and re-interview them, the adopted brother of a wealthy heiress. When Liam was brought back to the station for further questioning, he appeared deeply distressed. The investigator inquired once more about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam shared that the three of them grew up on the same street, attended the same school, and were closely knit, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston even took Sarah to the prom, but there were no romantic feelings between them. Liam mentioned that he and Sarah were not just friends. He considered her his sister. They even listed each other as siblings on their social media profiles. Sarah had no secrets from him, and she had told him that her mother had left her a significant amount of cash, most of which was kept in the safety deposit box. Allegedly, Sarah didn't trust her father, who also claimed a right to the funds, so she stored the money in the bank, but planned to retrieve it soon to run away to Canada. When this story was relayed to Michael Stern, he was quite surprised and offered his version of events. According to him, his wife began saving money for their daughter's future, for education, a wedding, or a home, from the moment Sarah was born. The cash was kept at home, stored in a shoebox, with many bills being old and some quite worn, though no one thought much of it at the time. After his wife passed away, the father handed the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills in the bank. Sarah followed his advice, depositing some of the money into her checking account for everyday expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She decided to use it to pay for university after finishing college and to travel the world. Michael sternly denied having any claim to the money for his own purposes. What is the best friend hiding? The revelation that the missing student had a large sum of money led investigators to consider the possibility that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. The investigation then decided to check her safety deposit box and bank transactions. It turned out that a few days before disappearing, Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount from an ATM and had also visited the bank to take out some cash from her box. Another surprise awaited the detectives. Bank surveillance footage revealed that Sarah hadn't gone to the bank alone, but was accompanied by Liam, who obviously knew about Sarah's banking activities. They decided to question Liam again, specifically why he hadn't mentioned this bank visit, which occurred on December 1st. His hesitation was noticeable, but he explained that Sarah trusted no one but him and had asked him to accompany her to the bank because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash back home. His explanation seemed logical, and his demeanor was natural. Moreover, it was discovered that a house across from the Stern residence had a security camera that captured the street and part of the neighbor's yard. Footage from this camera confirmed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 in the evening, then left for work and did not return, while the silver sedan left the garage around 11 at night. A plot straight out of a horror movie. About a month after the girl's disappearance, another acquaintance of hers named Anthony, who had been out of town for several weeks and was unaware of the events, walked into the police station with a bizarre and chilling story. It turned out Anthony had been in the same class with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduating, he dived deep into studying filmmaking, maintaining communication only with Liam, who also had an interest in cinema. Anthony recounted that about a month and a half before Sarah vanished, Liam visited him, and one evening they brainstormed ideas for a horror flick aimed at teenagers. Liam quickly came up with a story about a girl who secretly tells a friend about a large sum of money she possesses. The friend, after gaining her trust and learning all the details, strangles her and dumps her body in a turbulent river. Anthony liked the plot, and they even wrote a couple of pages of the script that evening. However, Anthony soon moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and then left town for a real film shoot where he was working as a camera assistant. Upon his return, Liam unexpectedly called him, inquiring if the police had visited him or summoned him for questioning. Surprised by such questions and learning of Sarah's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it, Anthony decided to go to the police himself. A horrifying confession. After hearing the new witness's testimony, the authorities suggested Anthony draw Liam into an open conversation and try to elicit a confession from him. Anthony agreed, and a plan was devised. He would invite Liam to collaborate on a project that required renting professional camera equipment, which they ostensibly couldn't afford. Knowing the suspect's aspirations of being in a movie, it was likely he wouldn't miss such an opportunity and might offer the money he took from Sarah. Liam took the bait almost immediately, but suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. A hidden camera was installed in Anthony's car, and he was instructed to carefully coax a confession out of his friend. When the two met, and Liam got into Anthony's car, he looked around cautiously, as if afraid there might be someone else inside. He then handed over an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, asking if it was enough to rent the filming equipment. Anthony nodded affirmatively, and then inquired where Liam got so much old currency. Liam hesitated, then admitted the money was Sarah's, which he and Preston had taken from her house because the dead don't need it. He didn't go into further details, but his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and Taylor on suspicion of crime. The accomplice's tale. Preston quickly started cooperating with the authorities, striking a deal with the prosecution. He claimed he did not participate in the act itself, but helped his friend cover up the evidence and dispose of the body. According to Preston, Liam began devising plans to take Sarah's money as soon as he learned of its existence. It turned out that Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret even from her best friend for a long time. But when she seriously started planning her trip to Canada, Liam inquired how she intended to fund it, prompting Sarah to reveal the money left by her mother. Liam convinced her that such a sum was safer in a home safe than a bank vault and insisted she withdraw the cash. He even borrowed a significant amount from her right before the tragedy, the same money she had withdrawn from the ATM. When Sarah's father was out of town on a business trip, Liam decided it was time to put his plan into action. He roped in Preston by promising him $25,000. McAtasney decided to handle the dirty work himself, requiring his friend only to help him erase any traces. He convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, failing to check how much she took out. They spent the next day together, with Liam waiting for the right moment. He locked Sarah's dog in another room to prevent it from defending its owner. Approaching her from behind, he began to strangle her. However, the crime proved more challenging than expected. Firstly, the athletic and strong Sarah resisted fiercely, leading to a struggle until she lost consciousness. Secondly, just when he thought she had passed, she would show signs of life. It took the perpetrator about half an hour to be sure Sarah Stern was no longer breathing. Afterward, Liam left her house, heading to work, leaving Preston to step in. He snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, out of the camera's view, dragged the body to the garage, and tidied up the room. A couple of hours later, Liam returned, took a small safe from Sarah's room, placed the body in the car, and drove off in such a way as to avoid being captured by the neighbor's camera. He headed to the bridge where Preston awaited in his own vehicle. Together, they disposed of the body in the river, wiped down the steering wheel, and drove away in Preston's car back to Liam's house to split the loot. They faced a huge disappointment as they found only $10,000 in the safe, not the $100,000 McAtasney had anticipated. However, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid suspicion. The accomplices buried the safe in a local park, spending only the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Trial and verdict. Despite Preston's confession, Liam McAtasney steadfastly denied any wrongdoing, attempting to shift the blame onto his friend. McAtasney's lawyer also insisted on his client's innocence, suggesting Taylor acted alone. Moreover, as the body was never found and the circumstances of the disappearance remained unclear, there was a lingering possibility that Sarah was still alive, having vanished without her documents, money, belongings, or phone. A search of Liam's house turned up nothing except a small key fitting the buried safe, identified by Preston. The trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the absence of a body and McAtasney's confessions, his guilt was established through the combination of evidence. The script described months before the incident, the key to the safe found in his home, his words captured in Anthony's car, and the old bills he handed over. Additionally, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that McAtasney was absent from work for a few hours that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the act, received an 18-year sentence for obstruction of justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor is eligible for parole no sooner than 15 years into his sentence. The body of college student Sarah Stern remains undiscovered to this day.
Taking the life of one's children is not just a heinous criminal offense. Such a desperate step can be pushed by a woman's altered consciousness under strong substances or by a painful psycho-emotional state when the body cannot cope with stress. The high-profile case of Veronica Youngblood has become a vivid and horrible example of how disturbed psyche, unhealthy relationships, and constant stress can lead to irreversible consequences. Veronica committed a terrible crime, but at the trial, the young woman claimed that, despite what she had done, she had always been a good mother and wished her children only good. This story evokes both anger and pity, but to understand what exactly pushed Veronica to such a terrible and inhumane act, you need to look back a few decades and see what she had to go through. Perhaps her own childhood traumas played no small part in this, but this does not absolve her of responsibility. Veronica Youngblood's abusive childhood. Veronica Youngblood, maiden name Castro, was born in 1986 in the suburbs of Santa Rosa in central Argentina. She was the eldest of 2 daughters in the family and was raised with her sister Mayra, who was born in 1988. The girl's childhood was poor and full of hardship, but not even hunger and lack of basic necessities was the worst. Her parents did not work anywhere, abused alcohol, and took their anger out on their eldest daughter, beating her almost daily, sometimes to such an extent that she could not walk. Grandfather also did not harbor any warm feelings for his own granddaughters, considering them extra hungry mouths that need to be fed. From an early age, Veronica got used to the fact that she had nowhere to wait for protection and support. She felt superfluous in her own family, and the only truly close person to her was only her younger sister. When the girl was 14 years old, her parents divorced and separated. Her father was not interested in the fate of his daughters, but her mother, who was actively trying to organize her personal life, did not need children. Veronica was forced to become an escort to support herself and her younger sister without any education because she saw no other way out. At the age of 15, she became pregnant, and at the age of 16, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter Sharon. She never gave her eldest daughter's father's name, and probably didn't know it herself, having gotten pregnant by one of her many clients, a follower of a strange cult. As a teenager, without support and help, the girl joined a rather strange South American religious cult called Umbanda. It was a combination of heterogeneous beliefs and cult positions, among which were the foundations of Catholicism, spiritualism, and African cults. In Umbanda, it is customary to honor spirit guides who are able to communicate with the souls of dead people. The followers of the cult also believe in reincarnation and spiritual development through various practices. Veronica, being an impressionable and driven girl, was quickly imbued with the peculiarities of this belief, and according to the memories of her younger sister, she herself began to believe that she could make contact with spirits and communicate with the dead. Veronica did talk about hearing voices and seeing dreams, and also believed that after death, the soul of each person is reborn for a better life. Most likely, such a specific religious cult was fertile ground for the development of mental illness, given Veronica's difficult childhood and her own parents' abuse of her. The other followers of the cult treated her with kindness and love, which is what she lacked the most, so she believed literally every word they told her, moving to the United States, meeting Ronald Youngblood. When exactly Veronica decided to move to the United States of America, it is not known, but it happened in the late 2000s, when she was a little more than 20 years old. Taking her young daughter, she settled in Hampton Roads, in the state of Virginia. There, the attractive young woman took a job with an escort service company. In late 2008, Veronica met a guy whose name was Ronald Youngblood. He was a few years older than her and served as a pilot in the U.S. Navy. He and Veronica first met when Ronald used the services of the company she worked for. Apparently, Ronald was immediately attracted to this young person because he himself expressed a desire to continue to communicate. Soon he insisted that Veronica left the escort, after which they began to live together. And in 2009, in one of the chapels in Las Vegas, the couple officially legalized their relationship, arranging a modest ceremony without guests. After the wedding, Veronica's life became stable for the first time, and she was not afraid to look into the future and confidently made plans. She had her own home, a caring husband with a stable job, who fully provided for her, while Veronica could be engaged in creating home comfort. But most importantly, Ronald took her daughter Sharon as his own, surrounding her with care and love. In 2013, the couple had their common child, daughter Brooklyn. The couple was over the seventh heaven from happiness, and the eldest heiress was happy that she had a baby sister, Sharon Youngblood. After the wedding, Ronald gave Veronica and her oldest daughter his last name, although officially the child he did not adopt. Nevertheless, the girl called him Daddy and reached out to him. Ronald himself tried not to deny her anything, paid attention, and engaged in the upbringing of the child. Sharon grew up quite bright, sociable, and purposeful girl. She studied well in school, had a lot of friends, was active and friendly. From an early age, she was involved in sports, was a member of the school cheerleading team, played tennis. But the girl achieved the greatest success in figure skating. Coach, who worked with Sharon, noted how easy and at ease she felt on the ice, as if in his native element. In childhood and adolescence, she regularly participated in various figure skating competitions, where she repeatedly won prizes. She was prophesied a brilliant sports career, noting the tenacity and diligence of the young figure skater, but alas, it was not destined to come true. Unstable family life. After several years of living together, the relationship between Ronald and Veronica began to deteriorate. Both spouses had difficult characters. They were excessively emotional and unyielding. If at first they managed to find compromises, then now neither of them did not want to make concessions. Moreover, the spouses began to do many things to each other for evil, because of which between them often began to erupt scandals with violent clarification of relations, mutual accusations, and insults. In addition, Ronald was very jealous and overbearing. If before the wedding he promised to forget about what his chosen one used to do, now he reminded her of it, every chance he got. He said that he pulled her out of the mud, provided for her, took her child, and now he demands to live by his rules. Family quarrels began to escalate into physical assaults, with the husband and wife taking turns to be the instigators of the fights. The police received complaints of domestic violence from both sides, but in most cases, these reports were soon withdrawn, and the spouses continued to live together. To be fair, the children were not involved in their parents' squabbles and were never physically hurt, although their emotional state can only be guessed at. In 2014, Ronald was sent to Central America, to the Republic of Honduras for duty, and his family followed him. During this period, relations between the spouses became very acute. Veronica complained to the local police that her husband was raising his hand against her, restricting her finances by blocking her card and forbidding her to use the internet and car. Ronald later said in his defense that he did so because he found out that his spouse was cheating on him. The husband thought that by depriving his wife of money, personal transportation, and the ability to communicate with her lover, he would keep her at home. As a result, Veronica filed a complaint with the U.S. Embassy and had her husband extradited from Honduras and returned to the United States. However, this incident did not affect his career, and he was soon transferred to Washington, D.C., to the main department of the country's Navy. However, relations between the couple finally soured. Breakup and ongoing conflicts.
In 2016, the spouses moved to Florida, the place of Ronald's new appointment. By that time, they had already virtually separated, but continued to live together under one roof, and Ron still fully supported Veronica and daughters. By the beginning of 2017, the family moved again, this time to the small town of Oakton, which is in the state of Virginia, where the spouses began the official divorce process. But even during the dissolution of marriage, Ron and Veronica did not separate. They lived in the same house, although apparently they simply could not stand each other anymore. Both later claimed that no matter what, they wanted to raise children together, but in fact, Veronica had no source of income and could not even rent a room for herself. The issue of future custody of the children became especially acute, and Veronica realized that she would not be able to raise the children on her own because they were all completely dependent on Ronald. He also realized this and did not miss the opportunity to remind his wife of this, sometimes descending to outright blackmail, which brought the young woman to hysterics. At some point, driven to despair, Veronica decided to take a loan from the bank to have at least some of their own funds. However, as a guarantor, she specified her still legal husband without informing him. When Ronald received a call from the bank, another scandal broke out. Naturally, he refused to act as guarantor, and the actions of his wife became for him another reason to humiliate her. True, a couple of months later, the couple was finally able to agree, and the scandals between them for a while subsided. According to the court decision, they could continue to live together, and together bring up their children, while neither of them will be charged alimony. But that truce didn't last long. In the fall of 2017, Ronald filed a lawsuit against Veronica, accusing her of aggressive and inadequate behavior. He stated that the spouse smashed his smartphone, launching it into the wall, drowned in a basin of water with a working laptop, and also smashed the windshield of his car with a stone. After that, Veronica was obliged to move out and forbade her to go near Ron. At the same time, the youngest daughter, Brooklyn, was temporarily given full custody of her father until the next court hearing. 3 weeks later, the divorce proceedings were finalized, but having received a certificate of divorce, the former spouses began to live together again and, it seemed, even reconciled. Courts and custody battle. About 6 months later, the former spouses appeared in court together again, but this time they provided a multi-page agreement detailing their plan for custody of their shared daughter. All the matter is that Ronald was transferred to the state of Missouri, and the former wife and children moved with him. But before Veronica wanted to officially settle a number of nuances regarding the custody of their daughter, Brooklyn. The agreement stated that Ronald would provide his ex-wife with housing that would be close to his home so they could raise their daughter together. The court approved the document in April 2018, and the move itself was scheduled for August of that year. But a month later, Veronica unexpectedly changed her decision and went to court again. The young woman turned for help to a lawyer, who had to confidently draw up and make a number of changes to the previously approved agreement. Veronica said she was doing this because of changed circumstances. By then, she had finished her nursing school training and had been offered a job in Oakton with a good salary. That way, she could more or less support herself and the girls, and there was no need to move after her ex-husband. In addition, the new job promised to help her find and pay for her own place to live. Due to her new circumstances, Veronica now sought full custody of her daughter Brooklyn, which she specified in an amendment to the agreement. The new hearing was held in July 2018, a month before the previously scheduled departure to Missouri. But the court refused to make any changes to the previously approved agreement, and the former spouses were to move to another state to share custody of their shared daughter, as previously agreed. Veronica seemed to agree with the court's decision, as she made no further attempt to challenge it. 2 weeks after the last court hearing, Ronald filed a legal notice with his new address where he would live after the move, which was less than a month away. Only a few minor details needed to be finalized, and he was on his way. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but Sharon and Brooklyn had only days to live. Disturbing call. Toward evening, on August 5, 2018, emergency services received a disturbing call from 15-year-old Sharon. The girl was crying and gasping in pain. She begged to be saved and talked about how much she wanted to live. She said she was badly injured, and when the cameraman asked what had happened, she said she had just been shot with a gun by her own mother. According to Sharon, she and her younger sister were asleep when their mom walked into the room and shot Brooklyn. At the sound of the gunshot, the older sister woke up and was literally numb with fear. She asked her mom, "What are you doing?" Veronica replied that she was taking her daughters to God. Sharon tried to run away, but Veronica shot her in the back. With her last strength, she made it to the next room, where she locked herself in and called emergency services. The operator assured Sharon that help was on its way and asked her to hold on for a few more minutes, but then he heard the girl screaming in despair, followed by another gunshot. Then there was a frightening silence and the call was cut off. The police and paramedics arrived on the scene by 10 o'clock in the evening, and a horrifying picture was revealed before them. By this time, Ronald, who was on business in another city, had also called the emergency services, asking them to send someone to his house immediately because his ex-wife, according to him, might have done something terrible. Veronica had already called him and told him everything, but Ron refused to believe in the truth of her words. Sharon was the first to be found lying on the floor with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the back. Amazingly, despite the massive blood loss, she still had a faint pulse and was desperately clinging to life. Sharon was quickly taken to the intensive care unit of the nearest hospital, but despite the efforts of doctors, the next day, she died. Brooklyn's breathless body was discovered in her bedroom, in her own bed. She had been killed by a single gunshot to the head. The girl's father arrived about an hour later, rushing home as fast as he could. But Veronica's whereabouts remained unknown until the emergency services received another call from one Manuel Bellows, who reported Veronica's whereabouts. Who is Manuel? Manuel was one of the lawyers the young woman consulted with in the spring of 2018 regarding custody of her youngest daughter. Veronica, as the lawyer later argued in court, immediately struck him as a rather serious, collected, and responsible young woman fighting for custody of her beloved daughters. In addition, she was very attractive in appearance, divorced, and not in a relationship at the time. The two soon hit it off, quickly developing into a tumultuous love affair. Only a few months later, Manuel noticed some oddities in her behavior, which alerted him in particular. It was the religious views of Veronica and her frightening statements about the upcoming meeting with God. At the end of July, Veronica called Manuel and invited him to her home, saying that they needed to have a serious talk. When he arrived, the young woman was home alone. Her ex-husband and children were staying with Ronald's relatives. The lights were off in the house, but candles were burning everywhere, creating a romantic atmosphere, and there was a dinner for 2 on the table. She confided in him that she had lost the nursing position she had been looking forward to and had refused to move to another state because of it. Veronica also shocked her boyfriend with the news that she was pregnant by him. This information was later unconfirmed. Manuel did not know how to react to this, and Veronica tried to seduce him and inclined him to intimacy. According to Manuel, nothing happened between them that night because he felt a strange discomfort and threat coming from Veronica, as if his life was in danger. He asked her for time to think about how to proceed, and then hurriedly left her house. On the evening of August 5th, Manuel heard someone ring the doorbell at his house. He opened the door and saw Veronica on the doorstep. She was frighteningly calm, and there was no emotion on her face at all. Veronica asked to be let into the house, but before Manuel could do so, he saw a gun in her hands, and he was scared shitless. He said he would call the police if she did not leave immediately, but Veronica, with the same stony face, replied that he could do so since she no longer cared. She then added that she had killed her daughters, so the police were already looking for her anyway. After these words, Manuel got really scared. He closed the door and hurried to the phone. While Veronica went back to the rental car, she came in and just waited to be arrested. The arrest and the full picture of the crime. When the police arrived at Manuel's house, Veronica was sitting in the car in the driver's seat, and next to her, in the passenger seat, lay the loaded gun she had used hours earlier to shoot her daughters. The young woman did not resist. There was still no emotion on her face. In addition to the gun, 2 more full magazines were found in the car. Already at the station, Veronica confessed that she had bought the gun 10 days ago at an exhibition in order to kill her daughters and then take her own life. According to her, she decided to take this desperate step to take revenge on her ex-husband and prevent him from taking their common daughter, Brooklyn. She also added that her personal life didn't work out and she became depressed. Apparently, the eldest daughter noticed the strange behavior of her mother and suspected something wrong because a few days before the tragedy, she directly asked her if she was going to kill them. But what the mother answered her remains a mystery. In the afternoon, on August 5th, Veronica gave her daughters sweets, in which she had previously mixed sleeping pills so that the girls would not resist. When they went to their room and fell asleep, the mother took out a prepared gun, loaded it, and went to her daughters. First, she went to Brooklyn's crib, put the gun to her head, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot woke up Sharon, who didn't immediately realize what was happening, and asked her mother about it. Veronica replied that she would take her and her sister to God, then pointed the gun at her eldest daughter. But Sharon jumped out of bed, rushing to the door, and was immediately shot in the back. She managed to run to the next room and call for help while her mother tried to open the door. When Veronica did enter the room, Sharon screamed and took a second bullet to the chest. Veronica then called her ex-husband and told him what she had done and was now going to take her own life as well. She blamed Ronald for everything, saying that she hated him and that he had ruined her life. However, the young woman then changed her mind about leaving her life for some reason and went to her boyfriend's house, where she was arrested. Young blood fully admitted her guilt, and when she was asked what punishment she would give herself, the woman said that it should be the death penalty. It is noteworthy that in the state of Virginia, such a measure has not been practiced for a long time, and Veronica knew about it. Trial and sentencing. Initially, the defendant refused the services of a lawyer and fully admitted her guilt, but then she abruptly changed her testimony and decided to use the help of a public defender. She later claimed that she heard voices ordering her to do this to her daughters, and she complied. Veronica also said that she had a harsh childhood, from which she remembered only beatings and hunger, and that her ex-husband had finally killed her belief that there was anything good waiting for her in life. She added that she did not want the same fate to befall her daughters. The trial took a long time because Veronica refused to leave her cell to attend the sessions. In addition, she attempted to commit suicide several times, but did so in such a way that she was saved each time and did not cause any serious harm to herself. The defense lawyer tried to convince the court that his client suffers from a mental disorder developed against the background of childhood traumas, the influence of a religious cult, and the abuse of her ex-husband. The defense lawyer also argued that Veronica was in an insane state at the time of the crime and did not realize her actions. But despite all the efforts of the lawyer, the court saw in the actions of the woman cold calculation, because she had purchased weapons in advance, fed the children sweets with sleeping pills, and then proceeded to implement her terrible plan. Her actions were not spontaneous. They could not be written off as a state of affect or a sharp aggravation of mental disorder. The final verdict in the case was handed down in March 2023. Veronica was found guilty and sentenced to 78 years in prison. In fact, this term will be a life sentence for her. It is worth noting that many people found Ronald's behavior in court strange. He did not look like a grief-stricken father, and when his former wife, sobbing, testified, he smirked. After the verdict, he only remarked that he was quite happy with the outcome. On March 1st, 2022, at the age of 77, Roger Kemp passed away in his home in Livewood. He was the best husband and father who cared for his family until the very last minute. However, a single memory from 20 years ago
haunted Roger until his death, as it had completely changed his life. For 2 long years, he was forced to become a meticulous investigator to find the person responsible for his only daughter's untimely demise. If not for Roger's involvement, the case might have remained unsolved as the police were nearly powerless. But beyond the police, there was Roger, who could not allow the criminal to go unpunished. Let's return to the past and see what happened on that tragic day. Let's begin. Our story took place in the small suburb of Livewood, Kansas, a very small and safe town in the state. Here, all the neighbors know each other by name and wish you a good day upon meeting. The morning of June 18, 2002, started as usual for 19-year-old Alexandra Kemp. Her father had gone to work, her younger brother was still in bed, and her mother was making a delicious breakfast. Alexandra didn't finish her coffee because she was in a hurry to get to work. Allie, as her loved ones affectionately called her, had just finished her first year of college and returned to her hometown for the summer holidays. She got a job as a lifeguard at an outdoor public pool, where her boyfriend and brother were already working. That day there were almost no visitors, and Allie calmly inspected the area and cleaned the auxiliary premises. Allie entered the pump room and turned around when an unfamiliar voice greeted her. She politely asked him to leave the restricted area and pointed to the door, but he attacked her and started tearing at her clothes. Allie hit him in the face, but he was much stronger. She tried to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand, and the noise from the operating pumps left no chance to be heard. The next moment, Allie lost consciousness. Sometime later, her brother Tyler came to the pool to take over her shift. He saw her personal belongings on a table, but could not find her anywhere. He searched all around, calling her by name, but Allie did not respond. In a panic, the young man called their father. Roger dropped everything and rushed to the pool. Together with Tyler, they carefully inspected the surrounding area, and to his relief, Roger found that Allie was not in the pool. Upon entering the pump room, Roger saw a large piece of tarpaulin. Shining a flashlight in the dim room, he noticed a pool of blood on the floor, and then a foot sticking out from under the tarp. The father threw off the tarp and cried out at the sight. He fell to his knees, trying to bring her to her senses, but she was unresponsive. At 5:29 p.m., Roger Kemp called the emergency services to report that his daughter had been fatally injured. Throughout the call, the father tried to revive his daughter. He tenderly covered her with his jacket, but blood continued to seep from the inflicted wounds. Roger talked to her and pleadingly asked her not to leave, but the girl was unconscious. The victim was urgently taken to the hospital, where the death of 19-year-old Allie Kemp was confirmed. "I hoped she was still conscious and could hear me, but she never came back," Roger said shortly after arriving at the local hospital. Alexandra Elizabeth Kemp suffered multiple head injuries from blunt force trauma, with a pool of blood nearby. Her shirt was torn, she was without pants and underwear, and there were signs of strangulation on her neck. Several of her fingers were broken, and her nails were torn off, suggesting that she had been brutally assaulted before being deprived of life. The pump room, where Allie's body was found, was in disarray, with items strewn about chaotically. It became clear that there had been a fierce struggle between Allie and her assailant, in which she did not give up, but he proved to be stronger. After her life was declared ended, the victim's body was sent for forensic examination, and the crime scene was thoroughly inspected. Unfortunately, the weapon used in the crime was not found either in the pump room or on the pool premises. However, a blood-stained tube of ointment, usually kept in the first aid kit, was found at the crime scene, which investigators found peculiar. They needed to determine why it was found near the victim's body. The ointment tube and its cap were collected for analysis. Police Chief Craig Hill, who inspected the crime scene, expressed his condolences to the parents of the deceased Allie Kemp and stated that in his 35 years of service, this was probably the most horrific crime that could occur in the Livewood community. This crime shocked the quiet town and left too many questions, both for the public and for the investigators. The investigation was puzzled, as one of the main questions in the crime against the young woman was the motive. The first suspected motive was robbery, but her purse and all its contents were untouched, which completely ruled out this theory. The second suspected motive was an assault, but after receiving the forensic examination report, it was established that Ali had not been subjected to intimate violence. The lack of either of these two motives, and indeed any motive at all, made the crime mysterious and strange even to experienced investigators. So who needed to end the life of a young woman whose life had just begun in such a brutal way? Alexandra Elizabeth Kemp was born on October 11, 1982, in the city of Leavenworth. She was the long-awaited first child in the Kemp family and their only daughter. Ali grew up in a loving home with her parents and two brothers in the idyllic, tree-lined suburb of Leavenworth. She graduated from high school with honors, loved soccer and poetry, and was voted the most beautiful girl in 8th grade. Following her dreams, Ali enrolled at Kansas State University. In 2002, she had just completed her first year at university and returned to her hometown of Leavenworth, where her family and boyfriend awaited her. She took a job as part of the service staff at the local pool, just 4 blocks from her family's home. It was a wonderful job at a nearby pool where her brother and boyfriend were already working. Thus, Ali was a young, promising woman who grew up surrounded by love and care, and who certainly could not have had any enemies. Investigators continued to explore various theories about the assault and interviewed friends and acquaintances of Ali to get a more complete picture of the day of the crime. One of the first suspects was Ali's boyfriend. Phil House had known Ali since school, and by 2002, they had been a couple for over 5 years. It seemed Phil had no reason to harm Ali, but the police had to consider him a suspect. During questioning, Phil explained that Ali had replaced him at the pool at 2 p.m., after which he went to another job. He was there until 4 p.m., then he was at a friend's house playing video games until he received a call about Ali being in the hospital. Phil's alibi was confirmed by colleagues and friends he had been playing games with. However, the police did obtain crucial information from him. It turned out that Ali had called him at 2:52 p.m., but Phil couldn't answer. When he called her back at 3:44 p.m., she did not pick up the phone, which led investigators to suspect that Ali met her tragic fate during this time frame. Despite the desire to solve the case quickly, this clue did not bring the police any closer to finding the criminal. There was hope in the testimony of potential witnesses, as there should have been plenty on a summer day at a public pool. However, due to unfortunate weather conditions, the pool was almost empty that day. The search for any clues or testimonies was progressing very slowly. A few days later, after re-interviewing the pool staff and the surrounding areas, it was established that on the day of the crime, 2 employees from a lawn service company were working in the parking lot. They were brought in for questioning, where they described noticing a car driving around the parking lot in circles around 2:40 p.m., occasionally leaving but then returning. They were able to provide a clear description of the suspicious vehicle, a beige 1980 Ford pickup. Although the police did not have the vehicle's license number, they now had a piece of important information. However, even more valuable information came from one of Ali's friends. The testimony of Ali's friend, Laurel Wynn, helped provide a description of the suspected criminal. It turned out that around 3 p.m. that day, Ali called her friend Laurel and asked her to keep her company during her shift at the pool, as the day was cloudy and not very warm, so there were hardly any visitors. Laurel agreed, and after a while her car pulled into the pool parking lot. She called Ali, but there was no answer. Not seeing Ali outside, Laurel blew loudly on a lifeguard whistle, thinking it would be amusing. At that moment, a man exited the pump room, pretending to talk on the phone. Laurel thought he might be Ali's boss, so she quickly left the pool to avoid causing her friend any trouble. As she left the pool area, the man turned around and waved at Laurel, allowing her to remember his face. Laurel did not wait for a call from her friend and left. Assuming she had seen the criminal, the police created and published a composite sketch based on Laurel's description, hoping it would lead them to the criminal. Thus, a very accurate sketch of the presumed criminal was made. The sketch and the description of the suspicious vehicle were broadcasted on local television. Undoubtedly, Such publicity increased the chances of identifying and capturing the criminal, and the police indeed received a massive number of reports from people who believed they had seen this man. This led the investigation to its first suspect, James Drider. A young man, Drider owned an old Ford pickup and closely resembled the composite sketch. He lived in Olade, approximately 20 minutes' drive from Livewood, where he worked as a mechanic in a small auto repair shop. Upon obtaining the address of the presumed suspect, police visited him at his workplace. However, James vehemently denied any involvement in the assault, and he had an alibi since he was at work all day. His boss confirmed that he was indeed at the auto shop on June 18th. Thus, despite a striking resemblance to the composite, James Drider was excluded from the list of suspects. The search continued. Months passed and the trail began to cool, but Roger never gave up. While detectives worked on every lead, he pursued new ones. Roger relentlessly conducted his own investigations. He regularly visited the police station, offering various ideas for capturing the criminal. Roger's unyielding efforts led him to appear on America's Most Wanted, where, in addition to sharing Ali's story, the composite sketch of the presumed suspect was shown. The popular show was broadcast not only on local television but also nationally. A new wave of messages flooded into police stations. Each message was meticulously processed, but for various reasons, each newly emerged suspect was almost immediately ruled out. Ali's boyfriend of 5 years, Phil House, also assisted. He initiated a virtual hunt, sending out emails to university students. He urged them to look at the composite sketch and watch the America's Most Wanted episode focusing on Ali's case. A reward of $50,000 was offered for any information leading to an arrest. Despite all efforts, the case again reached a dead end. However, 6 months after Ali's murder, detectives received new information about the previously familiar James Drider. It turned out that in January 2003, news outlets in neighboring Colorado reported the search for a man responsible for 3 assaults. Roger recognized Drider from the wanted sketch, who had been previously excluded as a suspect in Ali's murder and was now wanted for assaults. Despite Drider's alibi on the day of Ali Kemp's murder, the police now had no doubts they had found their suspect. But first, they needed to prove James's involvement. The man had no prior convictions, so he wasn't in the database, and investigators couldn't compare DNA. They needed to check this individual again and obtain his DNA to compare it with the DNA found at the crime scene. By this point, James Drider was on the run, making him very difficult to locate. It took the police 3 weeks to find him. At a gas station in Utah, Drider failed to pay for his fuel, and the staff detained him, calling the police. James Drider faced charges for 3 assaults and possibly also for the murder of Ali Kemp. When police compared his DNA sample with the sample from the crime scene, they were disappointed to find no matches.
James Drider was a serial offender, but he did not end Ali Kemp's life. This was a major setback as the investigation had come incredibly close to apprehending the suspect, only for detectives to have to start over from scratch. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with the police still having no new suspects in Ali Kemp's case. 2 years passed, and the police's interest in the case gradually waned, but not Ali's father, Roger. He did everything within his power to find his daughter's assailant, though his options were limited. He periodically contacted USA Today, which published the composite sketch of the presumed suspect. Roger desperately searched for a broad-faced, somewhat bald man. He posted wanted notices throughout the city. His goal as a devoted father was not only to find the criminal, but also to keep his daughter's story alive in the public consciousness. Then, one day, Roger had a simple and brilliant idea. At the city's entrance, he saw a billboard. It occurred to him that hundreds, even thousands of people saw this billboard daily. Why not place the composite sketch on it? He contacted an advertising company to rent the billboard. When the company's management learned about Mr. Kemp's story, they offered not just 1, but 8 billboards along highways near Livewood for the poster, free of charge. The estimated total daily viewership of these billboards was about 10,000, and Roger's efforts finally began to bear fruit. 2 years after Ali Kemp's murder, police started receiving reports of people resembling the sketch. The billboard, along with a higher reward and television advertisements, led to a flurry of tips, including one about a young man named Benjamin Appleby. This individual lived in Bantam, Connecticut, where he was known as Ted Hoover. The 29-year-old man lived under the pseudonym Hoover to avoid prosecution for an intimate offense from 1997. He owned a Ford pickup of the same beige color as the vehicle the suspect was believed to drive. It later turned out that Ted Hoover worked in pool maintenance in 2002, specifically at the pool where Ali was murdered. Armed with this information, police went to question Ted Hoover at his home. During the conversation, he behaved uncertainly and was visibly nervous. At the end of the discussion, Ted was asked to provide a DNA sample to clear himself from the list of suspects. He was clearly unprepared for this request and tried to evade it by making excuses. Initially, he asked to postpone providing samples until he could speak with his lawyer and requested some time to think. The next day, the detective contacted Ted Hoover's lawyer, who informed him that Ted did not want his DNA entered into the national database and thus was opposed to voluntarily providing a DNA sample to the police. Detectives attempted to press the lawyer to provide a letter of assurance that the DNA would not be entered into any database and would only be used within the scope of Ali Kemp's case materials. The lawyer requested a pause to relay this information to his client. However, 2 days later, the lawyer responded that his client was still against providing his DNA to the police. The detectives were convinced that this individual had something to hide. They remembered that they had spoken with Ted Hoover at the crime scene of Ali's death many years ago, although he did not seem suspicious at the time. The police had questioned him in connection with Ali's case, but were unable to achieve the desired breakthrough. The investigators had no choice but to secure a warrant for the compulsory collection of Ted Hoover's DNA. On March 24, 2004, armed with a warrant, they returned to Ted Hoover's residence, only to find the house empty. The man had fled. Ted Hoover was officially declared wanted on suspicion of Ali Kemp's murder. During the search, Roger continued to play an active role. He returned to the proven method of publishing posters on billboards across neighboring states. He purchased over 500 billboard advertisements. Ted Hoover's face was displayed in Colorado, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska. To fund such a massive manhunt, Roger Kemp had to spend all his savings and even sell the home his family had lived in for over 20 years, as the entire billboard campaign now cost over $100,000. And it was not in vain. In August 2004, the police received a tip from Missouri that someone recognized the person from the billboard. However, the tip mentioned that this individual was now living not under the name Ted Hoover, but as Benjamin Appleby. The police went to the address provided in the tip, and indeed, they found the man known to them as Ted Hoover. He was arrested on the spot on suspicion of murder. The police legally obtained a saliva sample from him. Their suspicions were confirmed when the DNA of Benjamin Appleby, aka Ted Hoover, matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Benjamin had several prior run-ins with the law, ranging from robbery to intimate offenses. The police in Connecticut arrested him on an earlier warrant charging him with indecent exposure. When questioned about Ali's murder, he confessed to the police that he approached the girl he liked to flirt with her, but she did not reciprocate. When he tried to touch her, she pushed him away, causing Benjamin to lose control and assault her. Later, Benjamin was charged with murder and attempted assault. He was found guilty on both counts. "I strangled her, I guess. I don't know why the hell I did it," said Benjamin Appleby in a recorded interview. According to Appleby, he touched her. "Not strongly," he said, and when she resisted, he began to strangle and beat the 19-year-old girl. Then the detectives learned the horrifying reason why the antiseptic ointment was open. Appleby tried to assault Ali when she lost consciousness and he needed lubrication. In his defense, Benjamin Appleby said that he simply snapped, headed back to his car, and drove away. On December 10, 2005, on the final day of the trial against Benjamin Appleby, aka Ted Hoover,
He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was found guilty under Kansas law, 50 years in prison with no chance for parole until 2054. However, Benjamin Appleby, who has been serving his sentence for several years now, has expressed doubts about the fairness of his sentence under the Kansas Hard 50 law. He argued that since the factors that led to his Hard 50 were determined by a judge, not a jury, as required by a previous U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Kansas law automatically required that his sentence be modified. Prosecutors contend that the state law does not apply to Benjamin Appleby's case, and that the Hard 50 should remain in effect. Roger Kemp warned the public that reducing the prison term for Benjamin Appleby would put other young women and girls at risk. This marked the end of Roger Kemp's struggle and his pursuit of the man who ended his daughter's life. His relentless determination to see Ali's assailant face justice led to a rather unusual idea. He wanted to use highway billboards so that every passerby could see the composite sketch. Roger Kemp's inventive idea of using billboards to reach more people proved very successful. Several states across the country decided to adopt similar measures with high success rates. After Benjamin Appleby's conviction, Roger Kemp founded the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation, named Take Defense. It offers self-defense training to girls and young women aged 12 to 23. Workshops are conducted nationwide. Participants have sent hundreds of testimonials from women saying that the training prevented attacks and even saved their lives. Until his last days, Kemp personally spoke at events and before each local class. Over 70,000 people across the country have taken this self-defense course. Later, he started a self-defense program for girls and women of all ages, named the Ali Kemp Educational Foundation, or simply TAKE. It teaches women how to protect themselves in dangerous situations. In 2011, Roger Kemp was also awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal for his work with the foundation. Out of 6,000 nominees, Kemp was one of 13 people to receive one of the highest honors a civilian can receive from the president. He believed his daughter would still be alive if she had known how to defend herself and, as a result, hoped to teach other women to do the same. Years after the tragic loss of his only beloved daughter, he still could not bear to describe the brutal assault on her and did not wish to recall that horrific day that completely changed his life. He ended her life because he attempted to attack her, and it's very hard for me to say assault her. He ended her life and then tried to assault her again, said Roger Kemp in an interview. Friends and acquaintances who took an active part in the search for Alexandra Kemp's assailant have become a close-knit family who still remember and mourn her sudden and unjust demise. Tireless, passionate, and kind, Roger Kemp passed away at the age of 77. He truly was a national treasure, said Jill Leaker, his friend and colleague. Roger Kemp's ingenuity helped hundreds of people find justice. Inspired by Kemp's idea, many other police departments across the country have adopted similar billboard strategies. To date, these billboards have helped authorities in Kansas alone capture more than 30 fugitives. Once, on a popular TV show, Roger Kemp said, "You have two choices. You can stay in bed and pull the covers over your head, or you can get out and fight the battle. I chose to fight. I would never let this guy win." And he kept his word. By his efforts, he protected the community from a brutal criminal who surely would have repeated his actions. Honor and praise to such a devoted, loving father and truly strong individual.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. The Roman poet Decimus Junius Juvenal once said, "There is scarcely a litigation in which the cause of the quarrel is not a woman. Times change, but morals remain the same, and not everyone may agree, but whatever happens, a lot of it comes down to the female gender. Often behind every twisted story is a woman." In the fall of 2001, another gruesome event rocked Oklahoma City. The city is in the heart of a deeply religious belt. The so-called Bible Belt of the United States is known as a hotbed of religious and conservative values. At the same time, this part of America is known for its high rates of crime, divorce, and teen pregnancy. The cold-blooded crime that occurred in Andrew's family, saddening and outraging the faith community, added to the unfortunate list. No breaks. One rainy October morning, a strange phone call rang in the office of Robert Andrew, senior vice president of a well-known advertising company. The man on the other end of the phone identified himself as a doctor at a local hospital. The unidentified man reported that Brenda, Mr. Andrews' wife, was in critical condition. In a panic, Rob rushed to his car, started the engine, and headed for the clinic. On the way, he noticed that when he pressed the brake pedal, the vehicle would not stop. After running a red traffic light, he successfully pulled over to the side of the road. The car stopped. Miraculously surviving, he called a cab. When he got to the hospital, he learned that his wife was not a patient. When Rob took the car to a repair shop, the technician told him that the brake hoses had been cut. The unfortunate man was speechless with surprise. Someone had obviously wanted to take his life and had come up with a good reason to drive the car. But who was capable of such an act? Putting all the details together, Rob headed to the police station. He informed law enforcement officials that someone had tried to take his life, and apparently, he had a pretty good idea who it was. The inseparable couple. Robert and Brenda were married for about 17 years. The couple had 2 beautiful children during their marriage. The couple were very religious, so they raised their children in faith and morals. Together, they attended church, were engaged in charity. To the average person, their union seemed happy and reliable. However, in October 2001, their family ship went down. Mrs. Andrew left her husband and filed for divorce. Good girl Brenda. Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963 in Enid, Oklahoma. The girl's parents were devout Christians. They gathered around the table for meals together, held group prayers, and attended the parish. Brenda grew up a quiet and peaceful child. She did well in school. She spent most of her time at church helping others. When many of her peers were dating guys, she waited for the one and only for life. In high school, the girl was a cheerleader for the soccer team. She was very fond of dancing, but never participated in parties. In general, in her younger years, Brenda was a model of piety and modesty, like her mother. By the way, she wanted to be like her mother in everything. Therefore, after marriage, she intended to become a housewife and devote herself to her husband and children. First, love. At the age of 17, the girl met Rob Andrew, the older brother of her friend. He was older and studied at one of the state universities. Young people began to communicate. It turned out that they had a lot in common, despite the fact that the guy was a Baptist and Brenda was a Lutheran. The two of them had conservative views on life, attended church, and dreamed of creating a large and friendly family, so the friendly relationship grew into a romantic one. After a while, the girl entered college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite the distance of 125 miles between them, the couple actively kept in touch. Eventually, to be closer to her lover, a year later Brenda transferred to a university in Ohio in Stillwater. Close to the summer of 1984, the lovers became husband and wife. Metamorphosis. Soon, Robert received a tempting job offer in Houston, Texas. The man doubted the decision, but Brenda convinced her spouse. While he was building a career as an advertising manager, she managed to get a degree and get a job in banking. Mrs. Andrew fell in love with the tall buildings of the city, nightclubs, and busy life. Texas changed the young woman. She got rid of her excessive modesty. She began to take care of herself, wear fashionable clothes, makeup, made a large circle of friends. Her husband was not very pleased with his wife's transformation. He thought that a believing woman should be more restrained. Besides, Rob was homesick. Therefore, when he was offered to return to the advertising agency in Oklahoma City, he gladly agreed. However, Brenda did not support her spouse. They even quarreled on this ground. Then still came to a compromise. The couple agreed that Robert will settle in a new place and find a suitable house. And if everything works out well, the wife will join him. A few months they lived separately from each other. Subsequently, the family was reunited. In the early 1990s, the Andrew couple settled in a luxurious house in the prestigious neighborhood of Landsbrook, and 9 months later they had a daughter, Tricity. Brenda even quit her job to become a housewife and engage in child rearing. 4 years later came son Parker. It seemed that there came a family idyll. For this, they had everything: love, children, home, and financial prosperity. What happened in Mrs. Andrews' garage? On November 20th, 2001, a few days before Thanksgiving, Rob planned to stop by Brenda's house. He had made arrangements with her in advance to take the children with him for the holidays. At the time, the couple was divorced. In the evening, his ex-wife met him on the doorstep of the house. She asked the man to go to the garage and help with the faulty equipment. When he bent down, he heard footsteps behind him. Robert turned toward the noise. A gunshot rang out and the wounded man fell to the concrete floor. Around 6 p.m., the emergency services received a call. The caller turned out to be Brenda Andrew. She reported that she was injured and her husband was dead. An ambulance immediately rushed to the scene. When the paramedics arrived, they found a horrific scene. In the garage, in a pool of blood, lay a man whose cause of death was a gunshot wound. His wife was luckier, shot in the arm. Brenda's clothes were stained with blood, and the woman herself looked remarkably detached. The paramedic put her condition down to shock. "I tried to give Rob first aid, but I think he's dead," she reported. The victim's hand was bandaged, and she was later taken to the hospital. As the ambulance left the scene, police began their examination. The first thing they found was a .22 caliber bullet lodged in the wall. A little while later, a shotgun shell casing was found, so multiple weapons were used in the attack. The second thing the officers noticed was the victim's wallet. He still had it on him, so the shooting wasn't connected to a robbery. To understand what happened, it was necessary to interview Mr. Andrews' ex-wife. At the clinic, Brenda explained the reason for their meeting. She also explained that while they were busy, 2 masked armed men entered the garage. The thugs shouted something in their direction, but what exactly she couldn't hear. One of them then shot Rob twice, and the other wounded her as she was about to flee. After that, the attackers hurriedly fled. Who the attackers were and what they had come for was not known to her. However, the victim added that Robert could hardly have enemies, as he was a decent and kind person, always helping other people. The woman admitted that she was frightened by what happened, especially the fact that there were children in the house at the time of the attack. However, many things in her words were contradictory. It was clear to the police that Brenda was not telling the truth, especially the fact that the children were not packed for the trip. Interviews with neighbors yielded no positive results. None of them had noticed anything strange that fateful evening. Hoping to find out the details of Brenda and Robert's personal life, the detectives decided to question the couple's acquaintances. Midlife crisis. It turns out that after the birth of their second child, the relationship between the couple became strained. Mr. Andrew repeatedly told friends and pastor that Brenda was abusive to him, and repeatedly stated that she hated their marriage. Ronnie Stump, a friend of Robert's who was a frequent visitor to the bereaved family, said he thought their feelings were abnormal. Brenda was not shy about her expressions even in the presence of strangers, and Rob clearly loved the woman more than she deserved, as he forgave her antics for quite a long time. Friends of the family unanimously claimed that she had undergone a strange metamorphosis. From an ordinary housewife, she turned into a woman of easy behavior. These accusations were not unfounded. There was a lot of evidence to support them. Brenda was clearly going through a midlife crisis. Her style of dress had changed. The once sophisticated woman began to dress vulgarly and brightly painted. But it didn't stop there. Mrs. Andrew became very secretive to her husband. She did not tell him where and with whom she spent time, what she was doing. Soon, Robert became aware of his wife's affairs on the side. In October 1997, she began a relationship with Rick Nunley, the husband of a friend. The man was Brenda's co-worker while working at an Oklahoma bank. The couple dated for a year, and afterward had an occasional phone relationship. Later, another lover was local store owner James Higgins. At first, he was only impressed by the frank outfits and flirting, and after, from the hands of Brenda, received the keys to the hotel. The man went about skillful seductress, and met with her 1-2 times a week. This affair lasted about 5 years. All this time, Rob remained in complete ignorance. However, he realized that their marriage is cracking at the seams. In addition, his wife practically stopped talking to him and spending time.
He hoped that everything will eventually get better and tried with all his might to keep the family. In 2001, Brenda stopped the relationship with Higgins, but not for the sake of her husband and the holy bonds of marriage. She was sinking more and more into the abyss of debauchery and vice. Fatal love. 2 years earlier, a Baptist church had sprung up in Oklahoma City, largely due to Mr. Andrews' contributions. In it, the man became a deacon, and his wife took the position of Sunday school teacher. From the outside, their family looked prosperous, adhering to morals and traditions. At that time, Brenda had not completely lost the image of a model wife. She gladly taught the children the basics of religion and fellowship. There, she met James Pavitt, a new lover. He was also a part-time school teacher, married and generally religious, and was friends with Rob. However, he too could not resist the charms and dazzling smile of Brenda. In the spring of 2001, they began to meet. At first, they did it secretly, but then, having lost the limits of prudence, they stopped hiding their feelings. Everyone in the church saw their sympathy for each other. Rob suspected his wife of infidelity and had a big fight with her. They separated. Just by this time, James had divorced his wife. Rob still dreamed of restoring the family, but Brenda was adamant and even filed for divorce. Just after this event, there was a strange call to Mr. Andrews' office, and then a shocking car malfunction. In making an attempt on his life, Rob suspected the sweet couple, which he reported to the police. What could have caused such thoughts in an open and ingenuous man? The same question was asked by law enforcement officials. Rob did not prevent the divorce. The agreement on children was reached. He helped Brenda financially. What else was there not to please a cheating husband? It was all about the money. In addition to teaching school, James Pavitt was an insurance agent. In the summer of that year, he took out an $800,000 insurance policy on Mr. Andrew. Brenda was the sole beneficiary. It's about the insurance. When officers began investigating the bizarre attack on Mr. Andrews' family, in addition to the relationship between the couple, they also became aware of the incident involving the car's brakes. Detectives compared the facts. Brenda's involvement in the murder of her husband became clearer. In addition, there was a new suspect in the case, her newfound lover. Then investigators learned that 2 weeks before the incident in the garage, Rob Andrew paid a visit to the insurance company. He wanted to exclude his unfaithful wife from his insurance policy. However, James refused to do so, citing that the contents of the contract could only be changed by the beneficiary himself, that is, Brenda Andrew. Not taking his former friend's word for it, Rob decided to verify the information with management. It turned out that Brenda and James had attempted to forge the insurance policy by transferring ownership to Mrs. Andrew. Rob's signature was falsified, plus it was dated retroactively. Mr. Andrew was assured by Pavitt's superiors that he still owned the policy, and only the policyholder could change the terms of the contract. When James learned of the incident, he was very angry, as the circumstances discovered were the reason for his dismissal. Investigation. Officers also became aware that Robert was in possession of a 16-gauge shotgun. When Rob was moving out of the house, Brenda did not give him the weapon. During a search of Andrew's home, the shotgun was strangely not found. Meanwhile, an inspection at Gigstad's neighbor's house yielded an unexpected result. A fired shell casing from the shotgun they were looking for was found on the bedroom floor, and several .22 caliber bullets were found in the attic of the Gigstad family home. At the time of the crime, the Gigstad couple was not home. No signs of forced entry were established. Mrs. Gigstad admitted that the spare key to their home was in Brenda Andrews' possession. Another piece of evidence came from Joanna Larson, Pavitt's daughter. On the day of the crime, the girl lent her father her car. He promised to get it repaired. However, when James returned the vehicle, the daughter realized that he did not fix it. In addition, Joanna found a strange find on the car mat, a bullet of .22 caliber. To top it all off, the girl admitted that her father told her to throw it away when she informed him about it. Investigators also discovered that James had purchased a handgun the week before the attack. Consequently, detectives planned to question the sweet couple. The Last Ride. On November 23rd, Robert Andrews' funeral was held. This crime raised many questions among family and friends. However, even more perplexity arose when Brenda and her children did not appear at the ceremony. Also, James Pavitt did not show up to say goodbye to his friend. No one present knew where they were. This worried not only Robert's relatives, but also the police. It became obvious that the no-shows had gone on the run. Apparently, they guessed that the officers were on the trail of the perpetrators. The suspects were identified. By then, the autopsy results had come back. Brenda's description of the attack differed significantly from the forensic report. As the police had suspected, 2 different weapons were used in the attack. Robert and Brenda were wounded differently than the dead man's wife described. The first shot at the man was indeed fired from a shotgun at long range, but the second came at close range from a .22 caliber pistol. Brenda's arm itself was also shot at close range with the same gun. By analyzing the bloodstains found and their location on the fabric, it was clear that the spouse was in the vicinity of the husband when he was shot. The angle of the blood matches where the shooter was. That is, it was Brenda who fired the second shot at the wounded Robert. After receiving the results of the examination, Brenda and James were officially recognized as suspects and declared wanted. On the run. Unfortunately, the fugitives were days ahead of police. Authorities alerted border officials that the suspects may have crossed the border. However, they were nowhere to be seen. After a while, it became clear that James and Brenda had fled the country. Police speculated that they were in Mexico. To catch the criminals, it was decided to block their accounts. Without their livelihood, they would sooner or later make themselves known, and so they did. 3 months later, Pavitt contacted his daughter. He asked her to send the money. Only one thing the man didn't take into account. The girl was cooperating with the investigation. Joanna had no doubts about her father's involvement in the crime. He was clearly hiding something from her. Even that time when he asked her boyfriend to call Mr. Andrew, pretending to be a doctor at the local hospital, and report his wife's illness. Thanks to James's call, the investigation became aware that the perpetrators were hiding in the city of Cancun. In February 2002, James Pavitt and Brenda Andrew were apprehended at the border and handed over to the U.S. authorities. The 2 were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. Meanwhile, the Andrew couple's children were placed in the care of their paternal grandparents. After their arrest, none of the defendants were willing to cooperate with the investigation. They did not plead guilty, talking in the presence of lawyers. Trials. The first to stand before the court was James. The prosecution carefully built a case. It was reported that in the past, Pavitt was an army sniper and knew how to handle firearms. His scandalous affair and attempts to prevent Rob Andrew from stripping Brenda of her beneficiary status were also voiced. His daughter's testimony and the physical evidence that was found were taken into account. The jury found James Pavitt guilty and sentenced him to death. Next to go on trial was Brenda Andrew. While James's trial was methodical, building up into a clear portrait of motives, means, and execution, Brenda's trial was full of sordid details, revelations, and intrigue. The prosecution brought Brenda's personality and her string of infidelities to the forefront. Her former lovers were invited to the hearing. They characterized the woman as a person of far from faith and integrity. When the prosecutor asked Brenda why she killed her husband, she replied, "God knows that in my heart I am pure and innocent. If you are people of faith, set me free." The prosecutor disagreed. He presented her as a lecherous woman who did not love her husband, cheated on him, and then killed him for selfish purposes. To prove his point, he showed the contents of a suitcase she had taken with her to Mexico. It contained lacy lingerie as well as the book 203 Ways to Drive a Man Crazy in Bed. Would a grieving widow run away from her husband's funeral? The prosecutor asked the defendant. In turn, the defense team tried to portray Brenda as a victim of what happened. The defense attorney recalled that she was also injured in the attack. However, forensic experts said that the woman shot herself in the arm, to which the defense said that it possessed a letter with Pavitt's sole confession to the crimes committed. That would seem to be a valid argument. However, the handwriting expertise established that the document was forged by Brenda Andrew herself. However, the most shocking revelation was another. Pavitt's attorney stated that in the event of his ward's death, Brenda became the beneficiary of his insurance policy. In time, apparently, the same fate awaited him as Rob. Or maybe Brenda thought that she would be able to prove her innocence, and the punishment for the crime would fall on the shoulders of her lover. After the latter's death sentence, she'd be entitled to the insurance money too. The jury deliberated for about 6 hours. In the end, Brenda Andrew was found guilty of the crime charged and sentenced to death.
Bottom line, both convicts are on death row awaiting execution. Brenda repeatedly appeals the judgment, but is unsuccessful. Pavitt's execution is scheduled for July 2024. It may be rescheduled again, as it has been done 4 times before. Brenda's execution date has not yet been set. She is the only woman sentenced to capital punishment in Oklahoma. The criminal intent of Brenda and James is horrific in and of itself. However, the fact that these men considered themselves God-fearing, teaching morality to children, further clouds the situation. People who preach things that do not guide their personal lives are unscrupulous and ruthless. You can expect anything from them because they are unfamiliar with moral principles, doomed to die. Did you know that 1 in 8 people on Earth suffer from a mental health disorder? According to statistics, there were almost 1 billion people with mental health disorders in 2019. Such diseases lead to unemployment, disability, and crime. Among them, 2 groups are distinguished. The first includes serious mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, hallucinations, psychoses, and borderline conditions. The second category is represented by neurotics and psychopaths, aggressive and demonstrative personalities. Sometimes people are unaware of their diagnosis for decades. Some of them live a normal life without causing harm to others. Therefore, the clinical diagnosis of psychopath is not made today. The disease is called otherwise character disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Of course, not all psychopaths are violent criminals, but many of them pose a threat to the well-being of another person. For example, his or her self-esteem, mental balance, or finances. Nevertheless, there are some people who are so rude and out of control that they have to serve serious sentences for the crime they committed or be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. The story in question happened to Nicola Edgington, a British citizen. Amazingly, a young woman suffering from mental illness has repeatedly asked the relevant authorities, including the police, to pay attention to her condition so that she did not make trouble. And what came out of it you will learn further. On October 10, 2011, an egregious incident occurred in Bexley Heath in the southeast of England. In the early hours of the morning, 2 women were attacked on a street in the town. The first victim was Carrie Clark, a 22-year-old artist. The girl was standing at a bus stop waiting for transportation. Without a hint of danger, was listening to music. At that time, she was approached by an unfamiliar woman in her 30s. Without further ado, she jumped on Carrie and stabbed her. Carrie fell to the ground in surprise. The attacker rushed at her, but the girl's reaction was faster. She grabbed the knife with her hand before the weapon reached her chest. The unconditional reflexes to survive were stronger than the situation. The victim even managed to push her abuser away. Carrie intercepted the knife, despite the pain from the blade, and began to scream. She called for help. At the same time, the girl asked her attacker what she was doing and if her head was all right. To which the woman replied that the only person with a knife in her hand on this street was Carrie herself. In addition, she demanded that she hand over the knife, which the resourceful Carrie certainly did not do. The atmosphere, as well as the conversation that took place between them, puzzled the intruder, and she fled to the other side of the street. However, the matter did not end there. While passers-by rushed to the victim, the criminal disappeared from sight. It turns out that she went into a butcher shop where she stole a knife. Then she noticed another woman standing with her back to her. Without thinking twice, she rushed towards her. The attack on 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was fierce and ruthless, striking her in the neck. the attacker practically decapitated the poor elderly woman. Before she knew it, she fell to the ground and died. The perpetrator fled the scene as quickly as she had appeared. Perhaps the accidents would have continued further if not for the arrival of the police. They managed to track down the inadequate woman through CCTV cameras. A short while later, she was arrested in one of the nearby stores. At the time of her arrest, she appeared unperturbed. The law enforcement officers got the impression that she was even happy to be caught. The detainee was taken to the station where she was identified. The attacker turned out to be 31-year-old Nicola Edgington, who suffers from a mental health disorder.
The authoritative woman dictated her rules, which the young man greatly disliked, and as soon as he reached adulthood, he immediately moved to a rented apartment. Unrequited love. In 2018, a young software specialist was interning at one of the largest tourist spas in the region. His skills and abilities were highly regarded by the management, and he was offered a permanent position with a stable income. Additionally, the sociable, open, and friendly young man quickly integrated into the team and formed friendships with his colleagues. Diogo conscientiously performed his duties and was always ready to help others. At this spa center worked an attractive young woman named Maria Malvero, towards whom the new IT specialist developed tender feelings. He began to court her cautiously, but for the most part, the colleague ignored his advances. Nevertheless, she communicated with him willingly, accepted gifts, but responded to all date invitations with refusals or quickly changed the subject. Diogo unknowingly fell deeply in love with this petite, dark-haired beauty, who held a rather untraditional position as a security service employee. Maria combined strength and femininity. She was approachable yet unattainable, and the young man couldn't resist her. This was his first true love, which proved to be fateful for him. Maria, the complicated Maria Malvero, a year older than Diogo, was also a native of Albufeira and came from a very modest family. She never knew her biological father, as he left when she was very young and subsequently showed no interest in her fate or provided financial support. Maria was raised by her mother and grandmother, but her grandmother passed away a few years ago, and her mother was diagnosed with a severe mental disorder and placed in a specialized clinic. From a young age, Maria understood that she could only rely on herself, and thus she strived to make her way in life. She was seriously involved in sports from school, strong and physically developed, while maintaining a delicate and graceful appearance. In high school, she took up jiu-jitsu and even earned a blue belt. Malvero dreamed of a career in law enforcement, but due to her mother's mental condition, she was denied admission to the police academy, which greatly upset her. Instead, she underwent special training, becoming a professional security officer, and was accepted into the security department of the spa center. Maria's salary barely covered the essentials, as she had to pay for the treatment and care of her ailing mother, whose condition was deteriorating. Nonetheless, the young woman did not despair. She remained optimistic about the future and was kind and friendly with those around her. However, the infatuated Diogo misinterpreted her politeness as reciprocal interest. He even turned down a promising job offer in the capital because he hoped to win Maria's love and did not want to be away from her. The young man spent a third of his salary on his beloved, buying her gifts and taking her to restaurants and amusement parks. They soon appeared to be a happy couple, yet throughout their time together, Maria never once allowed him a kiss. However, as it turned out, her reserve was not due to excessive modesty or shyness. One day, Diogo stumbled upon a short video on social media where his beloved was hugging and kissing another girl. It turned out she had been in a romantic relationship with 23-year-old Mariana Fanesco for over a year. Devastated, Diogo confronted Maria, asking why she had not been upfront with him, but she replied that she preferred to keep her personal life private. Despite such a revelation, Gonçalves continued his courtship, never giving up hope that one day she might reciprocate his love.
The greed for easy gain Mariana Finesco also came from a humble background and received no financial support from her family. She graduated from a nursing college and worked as a basic nurse at a local hospital. She and Maria dreamed of renting a place together to live, but their modest incomes and the need to support their families made this impossible. In January 2020, when Diogo once again invited Maria to dinner at a restaurant, he mentioned that the court case against the driver who fatally struck his mother had just concluded. The driver was found guilty and ordered to pay a substantial compensation of 100,000 euros, which had been transferred to Diogo's account that very day. Diogo spoke about it dispassionately, even with sadness, as no amount of money could bring back his closest person, and he didn't notice Maria's eyes light up when she heard the news. From that moment, their relationship unexpectedly progressed to a new level for Diogo. Maria began showing interest in him and even tenderly held his hand during walks, something she had never done before. Gonçalves couldn't believe his luck, feeling as though his deepest dream was coming true, but he did not ponder why this was happening or what caused such sudden and drastic changes in Maria's behavior. He simply enjoyed the moments, believing Maria's feelings for him were genuine. In reality, as soon as Malvero learned about the money Diogo had received, she shared the news with Finesco, and together they started planning how to seize these funds. Initially, they needed to make Diogo believe that Maria had finally noticed him as a man and reciprocated his affection. Then, the women planned to use either deceit or force to take the money from the young man and escape to another country, where they could start a new life with the stolen funds. A romantic evening turns into a brutal encounter. One day, Maria approached Diogo unexpectedly and suggested spending a romantic evening together. She mentioned that perhaps their relationship could reach a new level, that they could become a couple, and that something might develop between them. At that moment, Diogo was truly happy, and the sudden changes in the girl's behavior did not alarm him. He believed in the sincerity of her feelings. The long-awaited meeting was set for the evening of Friday, March 20th, 2020, at Diogo's rented apartment. The young man himself prepared dinner, set a table for two, bought flowers and a small gift for his beloved. Maria arrived around 8 o'clock in the evening. They sat down at the table, and she poured a fruit fresh that she had brought, urging Diogo to drink all of its contents to appreciate the taste of the beverage she had prepared. Without hesitation, he did so, unaware that the juice contained a high dose of a potent sedative that Mariana had obtained from her workplace. Soon, Diogo felt unwell. His head was spinning. Everything before his eyes blurred, and he felt sleepy. He realized something was wrong and became very nervous, trying to reach his phone, but Maria snatched the device from his hands, saying she wanted to perform an erotic dance for him. She turned on the music, began to slowly undress, and the young man seemed to calm down a bit. Then she tied him to a chair, presenting it as part of the game. At some point, Diogo panicked, tried to free himself, but fell to the floor along with the chair. Seeing Maria simply watching the events unfold, he began to scream and call for help, hoping that the neighbors could hear him. Then, she pressed on his neck, after which the young man lost consciousness. After this, she called Mariana, who had been waiting in a car parked nearby, ready for a signal. When Finesco entered the apartment, she saw Diogo lying on the floor and asked what had happened. Maria explained that the dosage of the drug had apparently been too small, and Diogo had not fallen asleep but started to panic and scream. The girls noticed that he was not breathing and decided to untie him, and Mariana, using her skills, began CPR. When Diogo regained consciousness, he again began to scream, tried to resist and ran out of the apartment. But Maria, using her martial arts skills, knocked him down and performed a chokehold. A few minutes later, Gonçalves showed no signs of life, and the friends did not attempt to revive him further. The imperfect crime. Using fingerprints and Face ID, the girls managed to unlock the deceased young man's phone and access his banking app. They transferred all his available funds to Maria's account, and then pondered how to dispose of the body to delay its discovery as long as possible. Knowing that Gonçalves was expected at work the next day, Malvero decided to send a message from his phone to his boss, requesting time off due to sudden family issues. This message surprised his boss, as during his tenure, the programmer had never asked for time off, been late, or swapped shifts. The boss tried to call the employee to find out what was happening, but all calls were rejected, followed by a message from Diogo claiming he couldn't talk right now. On Saturday, still contemplating what to do with the body, the culprits went to a large shopping mall where they spent some of the money they had stolen from the victim. Surveillance camera footage showed them behaving casually, making purchases, eating at the food court, and smiling as they chatted. They did not appear tense and clearly believed they could evade accountability. Returning to the apartment, the friends decided to sever Diogo's thumb so they could unlock his phone if needed to send messages on his behalf. It was at that moment they realized the best course would be to dismember the body and scatter it in various places, staging the young man's disappearance as if he had taken his own life. They bought plastic wrap and large trash bags, and using a kitchen cleaver and knives, separated the limbs and head from the torso. Mariama's knowledge of human anatomy proved quite useful during this gruesome task. The friends then packed all the parts into 4 bags, which they carried out of the apartment late at night and loaded into the trunk of Diogo's car. Maria drove the car of her deceased admirer, followed by her accomplice in her own vehicle. They drove out of town to a cliff where they dropped the bag containing the torso off the edge, leaving the car near the cliff to make it look as though the young man had jumped. However, they failed to notice that the body did not sink, but got stuck in a crevice at the base of the cliff. They then drove a few miles to a wooded slope where they threw out the head and discarded the victim's limbs over a small waterfall. Body parts on the coast. That Saturday, the management of the spa center reported the employee's disappearance to the police, mentioning the strange messages sent from his number. However, the search for the young man did not start until Sunday, a full day after the disappearance was reported. The first discovery was his car at the cliff's edge, and initially, it was presumed he had taken his own life. But just a few hours later, authorities found a torso in a bag in the crevice below, which was soon confirmed to be Gonçalves through forensic analysis. The same day, a group of tourists reported to the police that they had found a torn bag containing a human head. The limbs were only found several days later, after extensive searches involving divers. The crime scene was horrific, but according to colleagues and friends of the deceased, he had no enemies, was kind-hearted, never broke the law, and did not associate with people who had criminal records or were linked to criminal activities. But who then could have brutally taken the life of such a quiet and friendly young man? The investigation, arrest, and initial court decision. From the early stages of the investigation, it was discovered that the young man had recently received a significant amount of money in his account as compensation from a court decision. However, it was found that mysteriously, this money had been transferred to Diogo's colleague, Maria. She was interrogated as she and Mariana were about to leave the country through the airport. Malvero was caught off guard. She did not expect the police to track them down within just a few days. She confessed immediately, claiming that she committed the crime because her colleague had pursued her and tried to coerce her into intimacy. She also asserted that she had planned and executed the crime on her own, insisting her partner had no involvement. Nonetheless, both women were detained and taken to the station to give their statements. Maria insisted that she had accidentally strangled the young man after he tried to force her into intimacy. However, Diogo's colleagues maintained that he would never treat a woman he liked in such a manner, a sentiment supported by the correspondence between the victim and the accused. Additionally, a high concentration of a potent sedative found in the victim's blood suggested that he was incapacitated at the time of his death. Maria then tried to take full responsibility again, claiming she had committed the crime for the money. She alleged that Mariana was unaware, and when the incident occurred, she even tried to perform CPR on the young man. Mariana, however, contended that they had planned the theft together, intending only to transfer the money to their account and then flee, but that things did not go as planned. There was no doubt about the guilt of the women, but determining their exact roles in the crime proved challenging. Both pleaded to be placed in the same jail during the investigation so they could at least see each other, but despite their requests, they were placed in separate detention facilities, denying them any communication or contact. The trial began in July 2020. Despite Malvero's persistent claims of sole responsibility, investigators doubted she acted alone, questioning how she could skillfully dismember a body without anatomical knowledge. A 6-month period was allotted for the investigation to gather all relevant circumstances, evidence, and testimony. Throughout this time, the suspects had no contact with each other, and the case took an unexpected turn. At a hearing in February 2021, when Maria again claimed full responsibility, Mariana simply confirmed her statements, declaring she had no involvement in the murder or robbery. Maria's lover's behavior seemingly dismayed her, and a month later, Malvero changed her initial testimony. She now claimed that she acted under Mariana's direction, who was the crime's mastermind, and noted that it was her friend who dismembered the body because she knew how to do it best.
Maria added that she had initially taken the blame to protect her loved one, but realized that her friend had never truly loved her. Despite Malvero's altered testimony in April 2021, the court found her guilty of premeditated murder, mutilation of a body, robbery, and carjacking. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Mariana, as an accomplice, received a 4-year sentence, but was released on parole in less than a year. The court believed her attempts to perform CPR indicated that she had not intended to take his life and wanted to help. A new trial and an unexpected twist. After being released, Mariana Finesco agreed to give an interview to a local TV channel, a decision that proved to be a grave mistake. During the interview, she placed all the blame on her already incarcerated friend, all the while smiling and appearing very self-satisfied. Shortly after the video became public, a well-known psychologist analyzed it, explaining how gestures, facial expressions, and body language can indicate deception. He suggested that Mariana was reveling in her impunity and sense of superiority, indicating she was a seed manipulator capable of shifting all blame onto someone else. A month after her release, Finesco sued the hospital where she had previously worked, claiming she had been wrongfully terminated and demanded a significant amount as moral compensation. Surprisingly, the court sided with her, ordering the hospital management to reinstate her and pay the compensation she sought. It seemed that everything was going exceptionally well for Mariana. She was free, back at her job, and had received 40,000 euros in moral compensation. However, news soon came from the prison that Maria had taken her own life by hanging herself with a bedsheet in her cell. She left behind a note detailing aspects of Diogo's perpetration that implicated her friend. Following this incident, the case was reopened, and the victim's father filed an appeal, insisting that Finesco was as guilty as her accomplice. The Supreme Court only delivered the final verdict in June 2023, finding Mariana guilty of planning and carrying out the murder of Gonçalves, as well as dismembering his body and carjacking. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of early release. Since then, she and her lawyer have attempted to file appeals twice, but so far all their appeals have been rejected.
After Victor Alexander Puterol committed the heinous crime, he carelessly went to the home of his girlfriend's father, Reina, ostensibly to retrieve forgotten children's clothes. There he took a tablet belonging to one of the victimized girls and pawned it at a nearby pawn shop, receiving about 500 pesos. The next day, he spent the equivalent of US $10 while vacationing on the beach with his best friend, Crystal. During the outing, He confessed that he had done something bad to his lover, but without any specific details. Crystal later said that by Victor's tone, words, and expressions, she guessed the seriousness of what had happened. She even allegedly tried to visit the house, intending to see if Raina and her children were all right. However, Victor refused the visit, citing the disorder and difficult emotional atmosphere in the family. That was enough for the girl to decide that she had done the best she could in the situation. Crystal did not go to the police. Concerned neighbors contacted the police later when the smell of decomposition emanating from Raina and Victor's home became so strong that it could no longer be ignored or explained by rotting garbage or dead animals on the property. The pungent, nauseating odor was undoubtedly coming from the recently moved couple's home, where flies were congregating at the windows. Since Raina and Victor had only recently moved into the house and had not yet made friends with the neighbors, no one had their phone numbers or any other means of contacting the couple. Moreover, no one had seen Raina, Victor, or the children for several days. Due to the inability to contact the homeowners and the frightening smell, concerned neighbors called emergency services. A few hours after the call, law enforcement officers picked the door lock and entered the home. Inside, they were greeted by a truly horrifying sight: the 4 lifeless bodies of Raina and her children. Raina's daughters were found in a room next to their mother, and the son was found hanging from a rung in a closet. It's unclear how the press was immediately on the scene, but no sooner had the detectives established the identity of the man who lived with Raina and fined him, as a report with shocking details of the death of the family went live on one of the major metropolitan TV channels. So Victor Alexander Puteral, while at work in his workshop, learned that the police had broken into his house and found the bodies of 4 victims. Realizing that he would soon be detained, he sent a message to the owner of the workshop. "I cut short the life of the love of my life. She loved me with all her soul, and I loved her too, a perfect love with no arguments." It's a very sad story. In messages to Miguel Uranga Marancini, he passed on the contacts of Raina's relatives, asking them to pass them on to the police. He explained that he only trusted Miguel, deeply regretted what had happened, and asked him to convey to the biker club his last wish. He would like to leave as a biker, with a large motorcycle escort at the funeral. The last message, after which Victor stopped replying to Miguel, read, "Now I don't believe anyone. Everyone wants to save me, but it's not going to happen. I'm leaving this damned world. I don't care what happens. I'm leaving. See you later." Miguel Uranga contacted the police, told them everything, and added that his friend had reportedly taken his own life. Law enforcement officers tracked the location of Victor's cell phone and went to the scene. Victor Alexander Puteral did not do anything to himself. Moreover, he didn't even think about it. He didn't even feel remorse or guilt for what had happened. The man knew he would be caught, and in a sense planned his arrest to make it as safe for himself as possible. Gathering his backpack of essentials, he headed to a small park not far from the workshop. For a while, he sat pensively on the sidewalk next to the park. A passerby approached him and asked if he needed help. Shaking his head from side to side, he replied that he was fine, stood up, walked into the park, and lay down on the grass. In this position, looking serenely at the sky and putting his hands behind his head, Victor lay there for almost an hour. Around 8 a.m., a national police van arrived. The man did not move or resist arrest. The arrest took less than 5 minutes. Raina Isabel Encarnacion was born in 1985 in the Dominican Republic.
A few years after Raina was born, her parents decided to separate. Her father left the family, but continued to support his ex-wife and daughter. Later, Raina's mother met another man, and the girl had a stepfather, who essentially became another father to her. Raina developed a great bond with her mother's new husband and maintained a warm relationship with her biological father. Both men treated her with warmth and care. Raina grew up to be an inquisitive and active child. She loved learning and enjoyed going to school. Her father's house was nearby, and she often saw him. It seemed that this intelligent and cheerful girl had a great future ahead of her. After successfully completing school, Raina entered university and began her higher education in commercial law. At the same time, she applied to the Autonomous University of Santo Domingo with the dream of obtaining a second degree in medicine. But she was not accepted and had to postpone her dream until the following year. When Raina turned 20, she met a man much older than herself, Daniel Bowden. Despite the significant age difference, a romantic spark ignited between them. A few months into their relationship, Raina became pregnant and the couple married. As a result of this union, they had 3 children, Daniela, Arakmina, and Angela. Raina had to give up her dream of getting a second higher education. At first, Raina and Daniel's marriage seemed ideal, but over time, the age difference began to affect their relationship, leading to frequent quarrels. Daniel realized that the constant conflicts are harmful to their children, and after 8 years of life together, the couple decided to separate. A long legal battle ensued, primarily concerning child custody. Unable to reach an agreement on their own, family court specialists intervened. They decided to conduct a psychological evaluation to help the children formulate who they wanted to live with. The experts concluded that the father should be the guardian, taking into account his age, financial situation, and the opinion of the older children. However, the judge making the final decision ignored the experts' recommendations and awarded custody of the older children to Raina. The youngest daughter, Angela, was to be raised in the custody of one of Daniel's sisters. Tragically, this decision deprived the children of not only a future, but a life. The years that followed showed that the judge should have heeded the advice of experts. It turned out that Raina's struggle was more about alimony than the children. After gaining custody of the older children, she immediately handed them over to her mother, believing it to be the best solution for everyone. She then initiated a new legal dispute over alimony payments. Raina claimed that her ex-husband had not paid her any of the court-ordered amount. Daniel countered that he had fulfilled all obligations, although he couldn't provide proof, claiming the payments were made in cash. The legal battle lasted several months and concluded in the mother's favor, with Daniel making another alimony payment. Significantly, during the second legal proceeding, Raina's own mother testified in defense of her former son-in-law, Daniel. She believed that Daniel was an excellent and responsible father who deserved better treatment. She emphasized that he and her daughter had shared 8 beautiful years together, with Daniel being a good, responsible husband and father. It's not to say that Raina neglected her children entirely. She visited them almost daily at their grandmother's place and regularly took them to her home on weekends. The rest of the time, she lived life to the fullest, making up for lost youth. At one of the parties, she met her new love, Victor Alexander Puturale. It's hard to imagine what attracted the young woman to Victor. He was 2 years younger than Raina. On one hand, Victor made a striking first impression. A mystically minded young man with long black hair and glowing white contact lenses, a biker and metalhead. On the other hand, he was a dirty, unkempt, introverted, and insecure guy. These peculiarities didn't deter the girl. Soon, the love-struck couple moved in together. Raina's mother accepted Victor. The young man won her over with his affability and numerous tales of the difficult life situations he had endured. He often and in detail spoke about his challenging childhood when his mother left him under the care of a strict and harsh father.
Unfortunately, manipulating the maternal instinct did not alert the children's grandmother. On the contrary, it endeared her to the manipulator. Victor was born in 1987. He indeed spent his early years with his father. It is unknown whether he was cruel to him. Victor learned to adapt to circumstances, even if they were uncomfortable for him, and no one in his surroundings saw anything odd about him, except for his appearance. From childhood, Victor never got into conflicts. He excelled in school and graduated with honors. He couldn't attend university only because his parents couldn't afford it. Therefore, he started looking for work and soon got an internship in a motorcycle repair shop. Since then, motorcycles became his passion. Over time, Victor acquired a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and joined the subculture of motorcycle enthusiasts and fans. A quiet, law-abiding citizen with no history of even a parking ticket, Victor nevertheless scared those around him, always in black clothes, with eye makeup, painted nails, and often white contact lenses. Very rarely did his control slip, revealing the lurking monster. After the incident, a neighbor recalled how he accidentally saw Victor Puturale when he caught a neighbor's chicken, slit its throat, and drank the hot blood directly from the bird's wound. Raina and Victor took the children on weekends and sometimes on weekdays. The grandparents were very happy to have a break from their 3 noisy and active grandchildren. They saw that their daughter's new partner was kind and attentive to the children. Raina never complained to her parents about Victor, and in general, they never seemed to quarrel, which pleased her parents very much. The only shadow over this idyllic scene was a disturbing piece of information they had accidentally learned. Victor had a 10-year-old daughter whose biological mother had obtained a restraining order forbidding Victor from approaching the girl. Raina's parents couldn't understand why the mother would do such a thing. Raina's stepfather even followed Victor around a few times, but found nothing unusual or incriminating. The young man did not drink alcohol, did not use illegal substances, and was either at home or at work repairing motorcycles. He was never rude to the children, even when left alone with them. In other words, despite suspicions, he seemed like a normal person. Raina's parents wrote off the restraining order as her birth mother's eccentricity and settled down. The tale ended when the aunt who had been caring for the youngest daughter, Angela, informed Raina that she could no longer care for the girl. Around the same time, Raina's mother began having health problems, and the grandchildren had to move from their grandmother's house to Raina and Victor's. Suddenly, all 5 of them found themselves in a small apartment. However, the circumstances were very favorable. Raina was offered a new job with a higher salary. The reunited family moved into a spacious rented house with several separate rooms. A happy family life began. A spacious house, loving partners, children with their mother. Isn't that a sign that everything was going well? Perhaps it was, but soon Raina lost her job and the family faced some financial difficulties. According to Victor's mother, she even had to provide financial assistance to the young couple, as there was not enough money even for food, not to mention rent. Meanwhile, Raina's mother never heard about the difficulties her daughter was facing. Raina only occasionally brought the children to her mother's house, asking her grandmother to feed them well, which her grandmother was happy to do. In addition to the financial problems, something strange and clearly unhealthy began to happen in the couple. Raina had never complained to anyone about anything, but their relationship was far from normal. Shortly before the terrible events, Victor appeared on the street with short-cropped hair. It turned out that the couple had had a serious fight the night before, and Raina had cut off his long black hair as revenge while he slept. Additionally, Victor admitted that Raina threatened to leave him with the kids if he didn't find a well-paying job within a month. On Saturday, February 3, 2018, Raina went to her mother's house to pick up the children, who had been staying with their grandmother since Thursday. Raina's mother did not notice anything unusual in her daughter's behavior. On the contrary, she was sociable and in a normal mood. They had time to chat over a cup of tea while the children packed their things. The next day, early Sunday morning, February 4th, the girl and her mother had a brief telephone conversation during which they discussed current affairs and agreed to call each other later. Raina never contacted again. After numerous attempts to call and many text messages sent to her daughter and grandchildren, the woman called Victor, but he didn't pick up either. So the silence and ignoring of calls stretched for several days. Finally, on Wednesday, February 7th, Victor answered. He assured that everything was in order and promised that Raina would call back soon and explain everything in detail. He asked her not to worry and to wait for the call. The daughter never called back. It became clear to the parents that something terrible had happened. A day later, they received a call from law enforcement officers, from whom Raina's parents learned the horrifying details of what had happened. After the arrest, Victor Alexander immediately began to testify. He did not hide anything and did not count on leniency. According to him, he really wanted to end his life, but then changed his mind, believing that he should pay for what he had done. Thanks to the detailed testimony, it was possible to almost completely restore the chronology of events. On the morning of Sunday, February 4th, the roommates had another big fight in their shared bedroom. Victor struck Raina several blows on her neck, chest, and stomach, as a result of which she died. He then left her body locked in the room and sent Daniela, Raina's oldest child, to the store, asking her to buy him a pack of cigarettes. While the girl was gone, Victor went to the children's room and strangled Raina's daughter with a necktie while she slept. When Daniela returned from the store, he did the same thing to her as he had done to her sister. He then moved the children's bodies to the bedroom he shared with Reina. At that time, young Aramin was playing quietly in the small courtyard behind the house. Victor approached the boy and explained that his older sister had gone to the store and was too late, so he would take him to his aunt's house and then go look for Daniela. Aramin obediently went with Victor to the house of his aunt, Johanna Mendoza Coelho. Leaving the boy behind, the man returned to the house, intending to hide the consequences of his actions. It seems that it was only when he returned to the house that he realized that it was impossible to hide the truth, and it would inevitably be revealed. A few hours later, he returned for the boy and informed his aunt that Daniela had been found and it was time to go home. At home, Victor ended Aramin's life by hanging him from a rung inside a closet. The man claimed that he committed this crime because of the difficult financial situation they were all in, which he was psychologically unable to cope with. Victor's acquaintances confirmed that he had recently complained about family disagreements over money. Victor's mother told investigators that it was financial difficulties that had driven her son to a state of despair and forced him to commit such a grave act. The couple was already in a critical state, and their situation was exacerbated over the weekend when they did not receive their expected paycheck. I believe that it was this situation of my son, who was still a young man, being demanded money from a woman and her children, that pushed him to the edge, said Mrs. Joanna Mendoza, aunt of the accused. However, the extreme brutality of the crime was not consistent with a state of mental illness. The preliminary autopsy report clarified the situation, showing that all the female victims were not only deprived of their lives, but also abused. An investigation by the public prosecutor's office revealed that the victim, Reina Isabel Encarnacion, had repeatedly expressed concerns in correspondence with the accused on WhatsApp about the inappropriateness of intimate acts towards Angela while she was asleep. In one of the latest messages, the woman threatened her cohabitant that she would go to the police. Reina's mother told the police that the detained young man had always treated the three girls very well, but he had a special relationship with Angela. He carried her in his arms, often put her on his lap, hugged and kissed her. He even came up with a special nickname for her, Señorita. Investigators assumed that Victor had ended the lives of the family members not because of financial problems, but to cover up the wrongful acts committed against Angela. Forensic results confirmed that Reina, as well as the two girls, had been wrongfully abused. However, the experts could not determine whether the wrongful acts were committed before or after taking their lives, as the bodies were found at a late stage of decomposition. A psychiatric examination showed that Victor suffers from antisocial personality disorder, meaning he lacks both guilt and conscience. The heinous crime outraged and shocked the entire Dominican society. The trial began in January 2019 and was completed in just 2 days. Testimony was given by experts and forensic experts, investigators, and various witnesses. Especially a lot of information was obtained from Victor's friends. For example, Crystal, the defendant's best friend, said that on the day of his arrest, he gave her all of his social media passwords and his mother's phone number. According to her, it seemed that the young man was planning to leave his life. Another friend of the young man said that Victor confessed the crime to him in detail a few days before his arrest, but the confession was so horrifying that the friend took it as a joke. In general, everyone who had ever seen or met the accused was shocked by his act. Neighbors, teachers, co-workers, they always saw him as a quiet guy with a distinctive appearance and nothing more. He didn't seem confrontational, wasn't known as a brawler, and, according to them, never spoke ill of others. He just wasn't very social. Victor's only diagnosis as a child was attention deficit disorder, but according to his mother, the condition didn't cause any problems for the family or himself. Some 18 witnesses, including 2 forensic experts, testified at the trial. The latter provided such shocking details that even Victor's mother asked for the full weight of the law to fall on her son. Justice must be served, he must pay for everything he has done, she said in court. She begged Reina's family to forgive her for having such a son and shared their grief. Victor Alexander Putril pleaded guilty in court to taking the lives of Reina Isabel Encarnacion and her 3 children. He also apologized to the victim's family and the public for the crime. I accept the facts, and not everything that was said happened exactly as described. I realize that I cannot turn back time and bring back the lives I took. I apologize to the community and all family members for what happened. I contributed to my arrest because I realized that by ending my life, I would not be able to pay for my actions, Victor Pucherol calmly stated. The man received the most severe sentence then available in the Dominican Republic's judicial system, 30 years. At the time the sentence was pronounced, he was just 30 years old, meaning that under fortunate circumstances, he could leave prison and live the rest of his life in freedom. This possibility seriously urged the National Congress to expedite updates to the criminal code. The country's code, adopted in 1844, does not include cumulative punishment for multiple crimes. Had the updated criminal code, currently under consideration in the National Congress, been in effect, Victor Alexander would have faced a sentence of up to 60 years for his crime. The life-taking of Reina and her children drew attention to the urgency of replacing the code as soon as possible. Nevertheless, it can be said that justice prevailed. The perpetrator received the maximum sentence. At least Reina's mother, speaking on various television programs, stated that she was satisfied with the outcome of the case. The biological father of the 3 children who were taken cannot yet accept what happened. He stated that the tragedy with his children would not have occurred if the judge had listened to the experts and granted him custody.